7?
It's on.
It's on. Okay, wonderful. All right, welcome everybody. Today is Tuesday, June 11th at 3:47. We are convened as the Provo City School Board of Education. We are meeting at 280 West, 940 North in Provo, Utah. And we'll begin with a roll call. Jennifer Partridge, Vice President.
Lisa Boyce, Board Member.
Gina Hales, Board Member.
Meg Van Wagenen, Board Member.
Melanie Hall.
Melanie
Hall, Board Member.
Terry McCabe, Board Member. Devin Daly, Business Administrator.
Wendy Dow, Superintendent.
Okay, thank you. We want to excuse Board President Nielsen. She's been traveling with Dixon Middle School on their big trip to DC and is not quite back yet. So, excuse her. We want to thank our tech people, our administrative assistant Bonnie, and everybody else who is here with us today. So, all right, do we have a motion to start our study session?
I move that we begin our study session.
Okay, motion made by Board Member Hales. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Second by Board Member Van Wagenen.
Why were you looking at me?
I think Lisa
Terry
wanted to
doesn't ever do
I
it. You're
just
the
wanted
one.
to not be the one because I've done every other one.
Alright, so we got a first, we got a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Alright, we are now in our study session. So, okay. We are going to begin with our board handbook training, and that happens to be me. And that is on page 8 about the title of the sections are called Complaints from the Community and Complaints from District Employees. So it says when a board member receives an informal complaint, they should listen carefully. A single board member may respond to the patron or to the employee only as an individual and should direct the person to solve the problem by communicating with the individuals at the level where the problem originated before escalating to the next appropriate level. And then, so I think we all are already know this, right? But we're not here to solve their problem. We're here to help them know how to solve their problem, right? So it should go to their direct supervisor if they're an employee, or our policy does say if they've already tried to resolve it that way and it's not working out, or for whatever reason they're not comfortable with going to that person, maybe it's a harassment kind of complaint, then they go to the deputy superintendent. Is that still correct? Yeah, okay. Deputy superintendent. Do you guys have any questions about this, or things you have seen that worked well as you've worked with the community?
Oh, you guys are talking a bunch today.
Yeah.
It's a day. Something I'm trying to learn to do better on. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it this time.
And thank you. And I think just letting them know that they've been heard, right? And we appreciate hearing from them, and then helping them to see where to go to get it resolved, right?
There's a lot of that. So I get upset sometimes with legislators because parents will come to them or people will go to them and then they make a law about it. And so I try to remember that when I get complaints. I always send people back to where they need to be. And then if there's other concerns, then I will contact Wendy or Daryl or Jared or one of the J's.
There's a lot of J's.
But it's sometimes very tempting to just say I'll take care of it, but I think the most appropriate thing, especially thinking about being on the other end of that, that it's most appropriate for us to send them back to where they need to be, and then from there you can escalate it if things don't work out. But
yes. There's an analogy at one of the NSBA classes I went to that talked about, like, there's a helicopter in the sky. I hope I remember this as I'm saying it right. And then there's like the people on the ground, and the helicopter can see the overview, and the board, we're up in the helicopter and can kind of help direct, like, okay, here's generally what we want to be happening there on the ground, which is our teachers, our students, and it's the superintendent that's on the ladder that goes in between the helicopter and the people on the ground,
the
right?
The most dangerous part.
Yeah,
it is. You don't have to tell her.
Mission Impossible though,
Wow,
like,
I like it.
those cool ladders. Anyway, so like if we can also just remember that we have that bigger picture overview kind of thing, and we're not here to handle the small problems as an individual issue. But, okay. We will move on to item number 5, policy review. I'll turn it over to
How much time do I
Superintendent
have?
Dale.
I gotta pace myself here.
You got
Okay,
30 minutes.
Alright, Bonnie, will you pull up the presentation here? This will hopefully keep us on track. So we're just gonna go through this in order. I tried to give, you have all of the policies. I tried to do a summary of each thing, talk about questions, concerns, or feedback. Some of them we do have some feedback on, some of them we don't. And then also to look at what district leadership's recommendation is moving forward. And then obviously some of these we're asking for action on today. So the first policy we're going to talk about is policy 3305, which is our student privacy plan. This is a requirement of House Bill 257 that was passed in the 2024 Utah legislative session, stating that individuals in government spaces, schools are is a government space, a school is a government space, they must use the privacy space that corresponds to their sex at birth or to the sex listed on an unamended birth certificate. The law requires that we provide notice to families about this particular plan and policy, that we ensure compliance, and that we acknowledge that we will take administrative action if those do not, if there are individuals who do not comply. There was a suggestion to actually link it to state code. I couldn't find the state code written as of yet, so if I find it, we'll link it in there, but I did link it to the bill.
Is it active yet?
Well, it went into effect May 1st, but I don't think they've assigned it a code yet, so that's why. Next slide.
Enter adjournment 353.
So we put most of this into the procedure, so the policy is just like it's a requirement that we have this plan in place. The first procedure is that we have to provide notice, and so we will do this through the registration process. It will fulfill that requirement, and then if a student is requesting to use a privacy space that does not correspond with their sex, or if they request to use an alternative facility, then we need to reach out to their parents to notify them and start putting a privacy plan in place. We have talked about even creating possibly some sample templates that we could provide our administrators so that they would kind of know, well, what does this mean if they needed it. I think most of them can figure out how to manage a privacy plan with a student and a parent, but it has to be in collaboration with the parent. And then if there are students or employees that do not follow the policy, there is administrative action that can be taken. So for a student, it could result in disciplinary action, although that sounds like I'm suspending a student. That is not the intention. It would be to have a conversation and to explain with their parents what the law is, and to figure out a way that's going to work the best for that individual. For an employee, this would be an employee who knows that a student is like requesting this and maybe doesn't notify the parent. Then there could be some administrative action, conversation with that employee, educating them about that policy. This is something that we are going to have to educate our employees about at the beginning of the school year, because this traditionally, where we're including the parent, like it kind of triggers a conversation with the parents immediately, is something that's probably going to be new to several individuals, and there are going to be individuals that struggle with that. We also wanted to add into this that if we find that an individual has made a false report, as we know that these false reports have gone into the state auditor's office, we were subject to one of those false reports, that if we can identify who that individual is, that there would be administrative action against that individual. Any appeal, so if somebody who is, doesn't feel like that the privacy space that's being provided is adequate or whatnot, then they just appeal directly to the superintendent. So, to myself. Next slide. So Jennifer, I'm going to let you speak to some of the recommendations, and then Meg had a recommendation. I literally got the definition of sex from Merriam-Webster. But I liked your definition that
I think
used.
mine was from a dictionary too. so
Yes,
maybe just
I think yours
it
was a
a
lot,
var- it was
I
a
think yours was a
variation.
lot, I think yours was a lot better, so I have no, you know, what, I
Right.
just thought that it was important to put that in there so that people were understanding where we were getting that definition from. And then just some wordsmithing that I think would help us clarify that policy a little bit better because the wording was a little bit awkward. And I looked at it for a long time and couldn't figure out how to make it work. So I was really grateful that other people were willing to put the effort into that. I was like, thank you. So do you have any questions or other feedback or things that we need to address with this?
My only question was that has our legal counsel reviewed the privacy policy to make sure?
This privacy policy came as a model policy, so we're just following that particular model policy. So several districts have
From USB.
have utilized the same process.
So-
And it's taken almost like verbatim from the House bill. So.
I mean, I wonder about using the same definition that the state uses, because I think this definition here is problematic. I haven't seen Meg's
It's about the same.
change.
Yeah.
I think it's problematic, but if this is what the state has used, and we wanna be in compliance, then I understand that is, you know, necessary. But I just wanna say, I think that, I think it could be clearer, and also we could acknowledge that, I mean, this says, that are distinguished respectively as male or female or male. I mean, especially on the basis of their reproductive organs and structures, you know, people are born with both sets of reproductive organs, and so I just feel like if we are gonna constrain this definition, let's use the one that the law requires us to use, because I don't necessarily love this one.
Lisa, are you saying in general too, including it?
Yeah, if we are gonna use a language and definition around this, then let's, I
Use
say
the one
align it
in
as
the-
closely as we must to the state
Take it right out.
language, correct?
Yeah.
Because for me, if you say, you need to go to the operational privacy facility that corresponds with your sex, that does not tell you much in terms of what they're really telling you. What they're telling you by law, my understanding is that you need to go to the facility that aligns with your biological sex at birth. And so if that's what we're saying, either we be clear, or if we don't need to be clear, you know what I'm saying? I don't like the ambiguity in there. I feel like that's messy. Maybe it leaves doors open for people. I don't know, but I guess I just would like, I think clarity is kindness, and yet if we need to align, then I'd say let's just stick directly to what the state says.
So there is an instance that you need to be aware that there are states that do create birth certificates that are not amended, that you do change the birth certificate. So it does state in the law that you kind of default to what the birth certificate says as well. So there's kind of these two, the legal document as well as the other. So
That's why I just want there.
Yeah, that sounds great.
I wonder in this, because I mean this policy is definitely more controversial, and we're not putting this forward.
Right.
I wonder if we put language in here like as required by statute, just to kind of make it more clear that yes, we are operationally doing this, but it's not coming necessarily from us. This is a mandate from the state.
We did put that in
Yeah.
the,
Okay.
yeah, it's in there.
Maybe more.
It says in accordance with Utah House Bill, and it actually lists and links the legislation.
Well, I
and
was
actual
thinking more like at
policy.
the end of every paragraph. say,
Oh,
like,
gotcha, you want it like,
Yeah.
because the state requires it, because
Yeah.
the state requires it, gotcha, I'm tracking now.
No, I just want clarity, that's all.
Yeah, that sounds great. And it is to be noted that we have been given 30 days to approve this policy by the state auditor's office. So.
I'm fine with it as is, honestly, I just wanted to raise that.
So our recommendation as the district leadership team was to approve the policy with any changes discussed. So as in business meeting, if you want to make those adjustments, and the reason that we want to make it very clear that generally we try to do 2 readings of a policy, but the reason that we're not doing this is because of the complaint that was issued to the state auditor's office and just wanting to be in compliance. And then I would really like to direct our constituents who have issues with this legislation to provide feedback directly to the legislators who voted for it. Next.
A question about
Yeah.
this though. So, let's talk about the ones that I did send out the email,
Mhm.
for the policy lines 15 through 20. What, do people prefer how it is written, how it's first presented to us? Do you like one of the suggestions I gave? So which one do we
your
wanna
suggestion.
do?
First or the second, like.
I prefer the second one.
Right.
Sorry, I didn't see
I'm
the
fine
before.
with this.
And if we need to tweak anything that was suggested, that's fine too. But I think right now we should decide what we would go
that'd
into
be great.
business
Yep.
meeting.
I
support.
agree, either of them are fine, I like the second one better, as
Okay.
long as it covers everything that's covered.
Just moved a couple things around or, broke it up into sentences instead of one long one.
Just so I'm clear, like, reading this procedure-wise. So if there is a concern that comes up, ultimately, children, these kids will have to bring their birth certificate to.
We're not allowed to ask for that. So
Yeah,
so
how-
we would have a conversation with the parent and investigate and say, do we believe that there could be an individual? No, my child is using the right restroom. Okay. The state auditor's office has made it very clear that we're not gonna investigate birth certificates, and I'm not getting
I
into
agree.
that.
I'm not asking
No,
about.
I knew you
I'm
weren't,
just
Meg.
like,
I
oh
was
my
just
goodness.
Here for everybody watching.
You and I are on the same page.
But don't we already require them to, when they show up for kindergarten, they have to show their birth certificate?
They do,
That's-
but I
Here's your
know.
birthday, right?
I mean, that could be something a parent offers up as evidence of something
Sure.
if they chose to, but I think the state auditor's office was very clear that
Like, we're not
that
doing
we're not gonna
anything.
we're gonna investigate, and if we feel like, oh yeah, I am using a different restroom because that's where I feel comfortable, then we would have a conversation
And go through the privacy.
and go
plan
through the
and
privacy
everything.
plan.
Right, okay.
Yep. This is not meant to be a punitive, in my mind, situation. It's meant to collaborate with parents and to make sure we're providing kids with safe places. Do you wanna add anything to that, Doug, since you're the awesome person who actually crafted this policy and went through all of the effort of it?
I spent a lot of time during the weekend. I know this is, our broadcast, but I had a hard time finding other districts' copy of this privacy plan. So, not to feel like we're less indicted of not having this on our records right now, but the majority of school districts along the Wasatch Front that I was looking for a model did not have that in an accessible location. So I think the idea that the auditor is visiting with you has everything to do with the complaint that was put toward our school, and in that conversation was identified that we, like everyone else, are trying to catch up with the dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of legislative, mandates that we were placed under, and some of them with really an unreasonable timeline of May 1st to put into play. So I just want to give that as a little bit of context, not necessarily to feel all right, but the effort that we need to move quickly, but not, completely hurried, that we're out of control, I think is thoughtful. But we do want to meet this mandate. I think that we can continue to revise and work on this. So whether it be around definitions and so forth, but I agree with you, just because some of the cases we've dealt with since, there is some specific language in there that was fought out in the trenches between the people who opposed the House bill and the ACLU and so forth. So the one cases I've had to respond to, I've been on the phone with ACLU lawyers to say, well, this is what we fought really hard to get into the bill. So I don't want to take a lot of liberties
I agree with that.
about going outside of
I
what the
agree with
language
that.
is. And that's pretty much a cut and paste, that definition, for
Okay,
instance,
so
of what
that's
is
what I
in the
would
House
rather
bill.
do.
We did take a lot of liberty because we know there's a lot of legal language and kind of positioning that took place to create the language we did. It might not be
definition of
super
sex
friendly,
or-
it might not be super kind, but at this point, we just want to be compliant, and then we'll go from there.
Right.
That's what I proposed today.
I agree with that.
In the updated language, I did add in the word annual for the
Yeah, I
notice.
liked
Is
that
that
too. Yep.
accurate?
Yep, it is
Okay.
accurate.
Yeah, I'm
So,
fine with that second wording.
Okay.
I mean, I'm
Second
fine with it
wording
as
and
it
stay
is.
with the state's definition of
Yes.
sex. You got it.
Okay, and for now, we'll say HB 257
Seven
instead
until
of
we can
Utah
get
code.
the- yeah.
Okay.
So that's where we got the definition of sex, correct? It's straight off of the.
Right, but
what I
there's
wanted
so
to
much
clear
in
that.
that definition, and it goes into what this policy doesn't have, which maybe futures we could add into this section, is around the idea of the unamended versus amended
Yeah.
birth certificate, and what you have to demonstrate if it's an amended birth certificate. Like, so there's a lot more to this. This is the piece that had to be in play by
Yeah,
now.
that's right.
So more work to be done, that we'll get into the details,
I
but this
don't-
is right, cut and paste right from the House.
Well, I don't know that we need to reflect it, we can just go back to the, like, I don't know that we wanna reflect it all in here. You've done a nice job, Doug.
No,
think
thank
we
you.
did a really
And
good
more
job.
will come from just giving the State Office of Education a chance to put together their
Right.
rules off of
Yeah.
this, which is again, for me, a tidbit of a misstep of the legislature to not even allow our support at this State Board of Education to guide us and create some language and some model policies around all of this.
So there is a model policy now from the state that has come out as a result of that. So I thought that's where we had gotten this policy from.
We got this from another school
Oh, that's
district,
right,
right?
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right, now I'm remembering. Thanks, Faith, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay, next slide, policy 7040. This is records access and management. This is grandma. This is just an update to a current policy, and Devin and Caleb are the ones that primarily handled this particular policy. We had to change the designations of our records officers because those had changed. So you'll notice that those are the corrections there, and that we are requesting that the requests go through, and this is the updated link. We will make sure that that link is updated on the actual policy, so thank you for noting that it went to a different location. They'll put it in there, that'll allow us to track those requests, how fast we're responding to them. And then I went in and linked all of the state code that was actually in the policy, so it links straight out, so it has the further definitions directly in the policy itself. Next slide. This has been vetted by legal counsel. We will change the website submission on the policy. And so our recommendation is to go ahead and adopt the policy in the business meeting because it is procedural. It doesn't really represent a change in our philosophy, but provides just clarification, and this is where you're gonna go to submit this, and let's make sure we have the right people listed. So, any questions or feedback on that one? Anything you wanna add, Devin, Caleb?
Exactly. My only, when I saw it on there, it said, $22 an hour. And I was like, what, we make paying our people
That's
$25
actually-
an
that's
hour.
good. That's good
It's
question.
actually a state, isn't the amount listed in the state?
I believe it's listed in
It's
there.
in state code.
State code is what
Alright.
it's listed at. It is not very many people make $22 an hour, so I mean, it's a low amount, but that's what the state code allows. Right.
Okay. Next slide is our culture of belonging. This was a rewrite of our belief statement that guides our decision making and how we interact with students and the public. It's a revision of the diversity, equity, and inclusion statement as a result of HB 261, because you cannot put those three words in like conjunction with one another. Next slide. The only feedback, and Caleb, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, I felt like the only feedback that we got was on the third bullet. They were asking us to add facilities to the equitable distribution of resources. And so that's something that you could consider if you wanted to do that. I think what you were trying to discuss with this was the idea that the resources that are going to students, like to help, say, a student with disabilities or a student that is experiencing homelessness or something like that. But for many, for a few, facilities was a big deal. I think also in light of the conversations that we've been having about schools and that we're having a boundary and feasibility study, I'm sure that's generating some of that concern. I just wanted to also recommend that this demonstrates our commitment. Just because we have to change the language to be in alignment, we want to make sure that all of our students and community members know that they are valued and seen, that we are dedicated to giving them the resources they need to learn at the highest levels, and that hasn't changed. Like, in going through it, we're getting more information about how to manage this effectively to make sure that our students and our families are well cared for. So next slide. So our recommendation from our end was this is the second reading, so we have provided that opportunity for feedback. So if you felt comfortable, you could go ahead and adopt this, and then it would replace the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece. Go ahead.
It's the last slide for this one. My opinion as far as facilities go, and I think I said this in policy committee, is I do think we need to be equitable with the way that where we build schools and things like that. I do think that that's less needs to be in this statement and more needs to be in our like boundary study and all the things that we talk about there. That could be part of the conversation. I'm not sure that this is appropriate isn't the right word. It's just the most efficient. Yeah, it's not the most efficient place to put this, and it's not going to get any results by putting it here. It'll get more results by making sure that we note this when we're doing our boundary study.
Well, and the statement says our approach prioritizes equitable distribution of resources, which facilities are, and then the list says including, and then the things in the list, so it's not only limited to the current list. So I agree with Gina.
I'm not opposed to adding the word facilities in that list of things that are included. I don't think we're trying to not be equitable with that, and so if it encourages people to give us their feedback and input, and shows that we are listening, I'm fine with adding that in. And I think it is implied, in my mind, it is implied when we say resources and we talk about supports and things. And maybe it's a slippery slope if you feel like you've got to list all of this, but I would be fine either way. I'm fine with just putting it in there after, like, initiatives, facilities, and supports. Like, I don't know, it's not a binding something about what we are or aren't doing to me. It's just something that people are mindful of.
Other thoughts? I don't want to over-represent either, though, and make it seem like there were a ton of. I think it was like 3 emails, or it was a very small number of emails that we received about it. But
Right.
To your point, they made an
get that
effort.
many
We don't get them any
about
emails.
policies, so
Period. So the fact that 3 people were willing to
Yeah.
discuss it, I agree.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it's my dad, so.
Next slide. Oh, this is my favorite. Okay. So, and Doug's gonna chime in. Doug and Judy Rose are the 2 individuals that have spent an exorbitant amount of time going through this policy very, very carefully. We talked quite a bit about, do we just add it to our current 40-20 policy? Do we have a separate policy? Our view is that we needed to have a separate policy simply because it's applying to more than just curriculum adoption. It's applying to more than just library materials, and we'll talk more about that. So there's a specific policy that creates some guidance, and then some requirements, and then the actual procedure for going through this. So updates. It's now including all instructional materials. It is not just curriculum adoption or library books, and it defined all of those things. So even a guest speaker is now considered an instructional material or curricular material. There is a really clear distinction between objective sensitive material and subjective sensitive material, and how a text or how these materials are removed based on kind of a flow chart that is in place. So next slide. So who can initiate a challenge? This is also a change that has taken place as a result of this. It doesn't have to be a parent or a student. You actually can have a current Board of Education member. It can be a district employee, a student, or the parent of a child. Note that they have to be enrolled in the district. So anyway, so that could be interesting. Next slide. So this slide kind of shows us this flow chart that comes through. So somebody thinks that there's a material that falls under this definition of sensitive materials, and we just referenced the code, we just chose not to include all of that language in there. This flow chart has the language in it, if you want to check that out, but it's very specific and very detailed based on the definition of pornography and indecent material for students, and for minors. So once that review takes place, if the material contains any type of description that is listed there, so there's 3 things that trigger it, and it's one of those, it's not all 3 of them, it automatically is considered, has objective sensitive materials, and it will be pulled from student review immediately. It doesn't go through a review process, it's not, it's just, it's automatically done. And it doesn't matter, you don't take the whole work, you don't look at the work as a whole, it's just, you can basically pull a material based on a single sentence or phrase or paragraph, even if there's nothing else in the text that is objective. If it doesn't meet one of those 3 requirements, and we still think, yes, there is a reason to explore this further, then we're starting to look at, does this material taken as a whole have some sort of literary or artistic merit, scientific value? If it does, then we can go ahead and we can go through a review process, right? So then the review process has to include parents that are representative of that school's community. And we already have that process written into our policy, of how we deal with these challenges for library books. We would follow that same policy or that same procedure for reviewing that information. So it goes through that process then of being reviewed, and while it's being reviewed, it's still accessible to students with parent consent. So the parent has to be okay with it. If it's objectively sensitive, then no, it doesn't even matter if a parent consents to it, they can't access it in one of our schools. So that's a significant difference there. So then this committee will then decide if it's meeting this definition, and if they feel like that this is meeting the subjective sensitive materials definition, then they will go ahead and pull the material, and then at that point it's not available for student consumption. And then we also have to notify, once we're going through that process, we do have to notify USBE that we have pulled a particular text from this. You can appeal a decision directly to the school board. So that decision would come to the full board, they would review the information, and there would be a vote that would take place by the board as to whether or not to agree with that decision or not. So, next slide. What do you want to add to that, Doug?
No, I think you covered it well. I just probably more wanted just to answer questions that people have.
Okay, perfect.
And probably just the timing, just again, be aware that this is not a May 1, June 1. This is an August 1, I believe.
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
But the reason we wanted to have this conversation now is that we know we have people lining up a little bit for the time that this is in place. So we wanted to start a timeline with you that does allow for a reading. And so that's got our projection today, is that we'd like to give some time for the board, as well as, frankly, we're still waiting, besides that flow chart, to learn more from the State Board of Education, because there is a lot to this that we all want to talk about. And I think that it's maybe part of this idea that not only when we have a violation, but if there are 3 other school districts of the 41 school districts in the state, if 3 of those districts have something identified as a sensitive material, we receive a notice or on a clock to remove it, regardless of whether our locals have complained. So in other words, there's a whole state consortium around this. We're expecting later this month the State Board of Education and their team to give us some additional clarification about how they're going to put this in their rules and procedures.
So we kind of talked about this. Next slide. It goes through the review process if it's not the objective sensitive material. Next slide. Talked about that. After the review process, then the material can return to circulation if that committee determines that it does not contain sensitive materials, or if the work as a whole, it's determined that it is of literary interest, artistic interest, scientific interest. Next slide. That comes directly to the Board of Education. Next slide. And then this is what Doug was alluding to. The 3 school districts or 2 school districts and 5 charter schools, it will be removed across the state within 5 school days. You can appeal that decision to the state school board. There seems to be some sort of way in which the state school board could examine it, where you as the Board of Education could appeal that. Then it would only, if they voted to go ahead and defer that back to you, but it only pulls that text off of the sensitive materials list for that school district. It does not do it statewide. So they, anyway, I have questions about how that would actually operate. So
Can
go
I ask
ahead,
a
Meg,
question
please.
here?
Yep.
I keep reading things about this actually being retroactive as well, like the school districts were beginning a list saying, okay, in the past, what year, I don't know the time frame, these schools, these books, or this material has been taken out of 3 districts, so everyone has to do it. Do you know about that?
I don't know. I don't feel like it went through that. They did state that we didn't have to go through anything that we have gone through the subjectively sensitive materials piece and chose not to remove it. We don't have to re-review it for the objective thing unless
Okay.
somebody pulls that forward. I did read that part, but
There is something that states maybe what you're mentioning here. It says here a sensitive material determination occurring before July 1st, 2024, then is notified to the state board. So it doesn't necessarily impact us, but it could impact the state's ledger,
yeah.
right?
Okay.
Of saying that it's therefore there might be a couple districts who have something already identified as not appropriate, and they will, it seems like they will kind of capture that as on their state docket, right?
Yeah.
Then looking for additionals to add on before they would notify us.
I see, okay.
and there have been districts that have had quite a few challenges that have occurred. So I think Washington District, St. George has had the most. They've had hundreds. So next slide. So our recommendation is this is our first reading of this. I think we can have Caleb and Shauna put the stuff on the website and solicit feedback. Our desire is to have the approval at the June 25th board meeting simply because we won't have another board meeting prior to this going into effect, and I do think this is a very controversial issue that there are going to be individuals that are ready to roll with this, and if we're not in compliance on it, I think they're going to let us know. Any other questions?
I actually think this is really well done, so I just want to say thank you. I think it is important that we are clear about this, and that, you know, we're doing our part in this process, and I really appreciate this work. I think it's great. It's clear to me, like I read it through, I understand exactly what the process is. If I encountered something that I found, you know, distressing or I felt was sensitive, I would know exactly what to do, so I really like how clear it is. Thank you.
And prior to its implementation date, we're going to also try and create a pretty streamlined, straightforward way that people can access the complaint form. I think, for instance, whether it's a Google form or a Qualtrics form, so that I think traditionally we've had like PDFs on the website people can download and fill out and then take to somebody. But we're going to try and create a system that is pretty accessible with people to say, if I click on this form within district policy, and probably in multiple places having it on our website, that people could say it's logging the complaint, you know, in an efficient way. So, and it also will help us keep records, you know, as to which types of records. There's a ton of record keeping you can see in this, not only for us but also reporting to the state.
I'm glad it's electronic and not just a piece of paper, because I feel like that's easier to track
No
too,
question.
so, thanks.
Okay. Next policy is 5280, disciplinary action, orderly termination, suspension, and non-renewal. This is an update to a prior policy that we had in place. This was run through our legal counsel and actually, I think, completely crafted by our legal counsel. Just a couple of things to point out as it talks about this does not apply to at-will employees or temporary employees. These are not hourly employees. This is applying to people who are contracted. It does talk about what the principles of corrective action are in lines 28 through 38, like what should this look like. And then also indicates that past corrective action can also be utilized when establishing a pattern of behavior, because sometimes it's not necessarily the severity of one thing, but it's because there's a pattern of behavior that has emerged that needs to be addressed. And then the procedure that goes along with this talks about, it just outlines disciplinary action. I think it's important to understand that there's kind of two different ways in which things happen with employees. So there's for cause, so something that an employee is doing, for example, that is in violation of policy, in violation of ethical standards, there's improper conduct, something like that. That goes down what we call a for cause piece, and there can be really specific, very quick consequences that happen as a result of that. Unsatisfactory performance is separated out because that does require us to put in place a plan of assistance to retrain, to mentor, to give them an opportunity to improve. When we're going on a for cause, there are generally just directives that are given at that point. So it does define the corrective action that takes place in each of these instances. It defines what notice means for termination, for non-renewal. Non-renewal is of a provisional employee, not, so they're still kind of in that testing period of in their first 3 years. It also defines cause, improper conduct. Next slide, Bonnie. And it defines when a plan of assistance is required, and it defines the specific appeals process. So all of that's updated. What do you want to add, Jason?
I think you did a great job of covering it. I think this is just a policy that's been in place for a long time, and so we went through to do a review, and we worked through this with our policy committee that includes both associations before bringing it to the district policy committee.
Next slide. I think one of the questions that I get a lot, not a lot, but just making sure that this process is communicated clearly to all employees. It is a part of their onboarding each year that they have to sign off on that. We've been working to make sure that we need to really communicate with our employees. Like, when we have issues, a supervisor needs to address it, not once it's escalated to this level, right? We need to be having those conversations earlier rather than later. I think the same thing when an employee is also having a situation with a supervisor, that just needs to be communicated sooner rather than later. So a piece of this is to make sure that somehow we get in place either a flow chart, or this is kind of, we have some ideas about how we can communicate that more effectively in terms of the for cause piece as well as the unsatisfactory performance, because I don't think our employees clearly understand the difference sometimes between those two. And why does this person get a plan of assistance and this person doesn't? What does that look like?
So this is a procedure, is that correct?
It's a policy, but it has
Policy
but the
okay.
procedure
So,
outlines the process of that disciplinary action.
Okay.
So you're actually approving the policy, but the procedure is really
And the part of it.
yeah, it's a part of it.
I thought when we were hearing from employees around the idea of some kind of employee handbook, like I was thinking about, some of these are hard to read,
Yes.
the legal language of it. And I guess the danger is if you simplify it or summarize it, then are you still liable for the entire policy?
Right.
So I can see that might be challenging, but I would love there to be, like, in our resources, a link to if you just want someone to talk you through this, call Jason or call call this person. Like, here's an actual person who'll just get on the phone and talk you through it, and you can say, now what's the difference between this and that, and just make sure you have an understanding. Like, I think this is one that would be great to make sure we support people's understanding on it. That's all. Right.
Thank you.
Because it sounds really kind of legal and clinical, and I know it's meant with warmth and care, right? Like, we want you to succeed, and we wanna explain the process of how we're gonna support people who are not having a great work experience or who, whatever, as well as problems.
So at the bottom of both of them, it says, here's the legal references, but they're all Utah State Code. Is there any federal laws that we need to make sure we're complying with?
I would tell you that I don't know the answer to that, but seeing as it was crafted by our attorney, I would think that she would have put those in if she felt like they were important. I think a lot of the federal legislation that comes through is more towards discrimination and those pieces, and so you'll see that come about in our discrimination policies. So it's a great question though. Okay, next one. So we would like to submit that out for feedback, and then you would vote on that one on June 25th as well. Okay. Policy 3401 is our policy on wellness. Jared has been working really hard with some of our elementary principals, and we've been working with some parents who've been pretty concerned about the length of school lunch. So when you read this procedure, we put it for elementary school 20 minutes of seated time for lunch with the administrators working with their staff to encourage students to use the full amount of time to eat. I don't want like an administrator sitting in the cafeteria and like sitting on a child and being like, you can't leave, it hasn't been 20 minutes. Like, but there are clearly things that we can do to encourage students to utilize the entire time, and making sure that there's enough time for recess, so that kids don't feel like, well, if I don't hurry through this, then I don't get the recess time. So we've been working with our administrators on that. Our district leadership expectation is, I don't know why that says all schools will have, it should say a master schedule. So I clearly started talking about this and then I didn't finish my thought. But all schools will have a minimum of 35 minutes for lunch. And so that also falls in line with the association brought to our attention that some of our middle schools and some of our high schools, when they would add in the 5 minutes of passing time, they weren't getting the full 30 minutes. So the passing time for dismissing from a class and then coming back to class, that was all being couched in that 30 minutes, and so by the time that they actually got to leave, they were only getting like 22 minutes, which leads to insanity for any person. So so that's why we put in place that 35-minute requirement there. So and then it really does need to, oh, see, I started it on one and then I went to the next one, so clearly I just have lost my mind. So no, go back to the other slide. Oh no, I already talked about that, never mind. Go to the next one, sorry Bonnie. Wow, you're so frustrated with me and you're so good. So there is no required action from you as a board because it is a procedure that's tied to the wellness policy, but I know it has been a conversation throughout the district. There is quite a movement to make this something that is a priority for many individuals, and so I just wanted you to be aware of what our actions are. I get concerned about making it a policy that lunch has to be that long, because then as soon as there's an emergency and we have to make some sort of adjustment, then I feel like somebody can come back and say, well, that person needs to be written up, or this school needs to, you know, I don't like that. I wanna set it as, this is what we know is in the best interest of students, and we trust our administrators to do what we need to do, and that we dedicate ourselves as the district leadership team to ensure that that's happening. We do need to change the procedure number from 1 to 5. I don't think when Jared crafted this that he realized that there were already 4 procedures. So it's not replacing number 1. We will actually change it to procedure 5 for that. And then I just feel like that we need to communicate to our stakeholders the rationale for the procedure and what we can do to support with this.
My question is, it's titled elementary school lunch, but you keep talking to us about all the lunches. So should it be for school lunch and not just elementary
we
school?
Can add, we made this specifically for elementary because of the recess piece of it, so we could add a procedure for secondary. So if that's a recommendation you would like to make, we're happy to do that, and just state that we're recommending 35 minutes. All of our principals are aware of that, and they are submitting master schedules to their, to Daryl and Jared to verify that is in place. Part of what created angst for principals was the fact that they felt like there was a 990 hour minimum for instruction. Once we were able to identify that that was not the case, then we can say, okay, we need to not be so paranoid about meeting that particular requirement. We also have instructional guides that have come from our teaching and learning department that talk about this is how much a reading block would be and whatnot. We have asked our teaching and learning department to go through that, particularly at the elementary level, to adjust those. And like if a school doesn't quite have that amount of time, what their recommendation would be about where those minutes should be cut, right? But that would be a decision that the principal would make. And so, you know, there might be, especially when you're talking about a dual immersion school, that gets really tricky with all of the requirements that are happening there. So if they're having to make some adjustments, I think it's just helpful to say, here's something to think about, but obviously the principal needs to work with their community and they know the data of their school, so they need to be making those decisions, so.
That was kind of what my question was. Should the principals email, in their first email of
Great
this,
idea.
should they send out to the parents, here's your child's lunch schedule, here's the school lunch schedule, if you have questions or whatever. That way everybody knows what it is.
That's a great idea. I think the concern that some principals have is, are we cutting instructional time as a result of this, right? Some principals are like, well, we can solve that by, we just extend the school day by 5 minutes. We're not extending the contract time of the teachers, we would just be extending the number of minutes, but that creates a whole other discussion of transportation and what that might look like. And so if that's something that the principals start letting us know, like our teachers are really pushing back on this loss of instructional time, then we may need to reevaluate that and work with transportation to create a solution. But that's something that's going to take a little bit more time. So, I don't think I got through it in 30 minutes, but
No,
I tried.
This is important, and there's a lot there.
So.
Okay, I was just looking over the procedure. I mean, the only thing about recesses talks about an optional lunchtime recess.
And we can just change
so
it
I
to
think
secondary.
really you could just,
or just
say school lunch.
You got
Yeah, it doesn't have to be
I like that.
specific to elementary. So, all right. Any other board member feedback, input, questions?
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, thank you to the whole team.
Yeah, well done.
for
Yeah,
writing
so
these
this
policies.
was like so many people that helped with
Yeah.
this. We could not have done it without all of these individuals, so.
Well, I think just quickly to note on that, I think even myself, it's easy to say, well, let's just add this time and this discussion. I think just lends to all the moving parts and all the considerations that go into making something like this work and make it even a change to add that 5 minutes. So I appreciate that, this discussion and all that work to kind of really figure this out. And I think it's good for ourselves, the public, to understand all the moving pieces.
Well, I didn't even realize, like, this was a thing that was brought up. Like, I didn't realize how long the salad bar takes kids to get through. And so there's like this whole process about, could we just have 2 salad bars, or could we change where kids are getting their condiments from, because that actually is what's eating up the time. And I was like, these are things I had never even thought about, because I had a principal that was just panicking, being like, I'm gonna have 45 minutes for lunch if they have to have 20 minutes of seated time. Have you seen a first grader get a salad? You know, like, and I was like, I didn't even think about a first grader getting
we're
a
glad
salad.
you're getting a salad.
You know, so what does, yeah, good job getting a salad, but are you really?
Yeah.
Like, what's happening?
Yeah. Awesome.
Or is it just fun to use the time?
All right,
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
gonna move forward, but only 20 minutes schedule, but that's okay. We've got all night, right? So now we're gonna have item number 6, our construction update. Devin, would you like to have
Chad
Chad?
is here
Okay.
to present. I am.
Okay, we've got 10 minutes designated for this item. So. Welcome, Chad.
Thank you. Good evening.
Can you guys turn me around so I can see
Oh,
this?
yeah.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, move the chair.
And move the
Yeah.
chair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you please turn
I can't get up.
All right.
Okay, Wasatch. We'll start with Wasatch today. It's going well. They're making some good progress. We're still on target for mid-January. We're still pushing to try to get that moved into December. Electrical gear is the biggest one that we're waiting on, that we're not going to be able to get not coming until September. And then we can't finish all the interior finishes that need the space acclimated before that comes, but everything is lined up to be ahead of that and ready for that. The roof, all of the structural steel will be completely done in about 2 weeks. The roof will be done by about the end of the month, but it's enclosed well enough that it's progressing with finishes inside as they can next. Site, they're making a big push. You can see the veneer starting to go around the side here, and I think I have another one. We're getting some concrete in for the playground. It'll be that soft surface up on top of that. They're trying to get the masons, they will be done this week to move over to the front of the building so that they can finish up all the site concrete work here and get landscaping done this summer.
Wait, sorry, can you show where the playground goes?
It's all right back here. So it's this little hill. So there's steps that come up, and then it's the swings, I think, some of the swings up here.
Up
and
on the
then
hill?
Little hill was the slides that go down it.
Oh, okay.
Lisa, we're gonna make you go down the slide. We're gonna take a video of that.
Just looking from the other direction. Yeah, same thing.
Chad, on this picture, can you just show me again on the back of the site where, when the kids are on that sidewalk, where they can enter the school grounds?
They come in right at the bottom of this, so
Okay.
right here. And then they'll come in the back door right there. The sidewalk's not in yet, but yeah, it'll be coming right here. So yeah, once
Okay.
these masonry guys get out of the way, so you can see they've done what they can. They got these ball walls. They'll finish the rest of the concrete back in here and the sidewalks. Just some of the detail of the masonry going on the back. So this is on the back of the kitchen, the multi-use room. This is going to be metal panels up on the top of there, above that brick. This is over at the kindergarten, backside of kindergarten, just a different brick pattern and color.
And do they have the same playground up the steps, or do they have a kindergarten playground that's closer?
They have a
to-
separate
Yeah.
kindergarten one
Okay,
that's,
great.
yeah, over there. So this is
Okay.
the main one.
Perfect.
So yeah, here's that hill that will have the slides going down. And then these are larger steps, and then these are going to be intermittent regular height steps.
So will the slide be built into the hill, or is an actual
No,
place
it kinda
set? I'm just
sits on
curious.
top of it, yeah.
Yeah. You're not gonna jump off those swings, are you?
Do we still put swings in? I guess we do.
Inside of the auditorium, this will probably be the last roof to go on, since it's got the least amount of finishes in there. They're trying to get everything else buttoned up and enclosed. Next one. First floor, looking down, this one's looking down toward the south, and then this is in the administration area, getting the paint in.
Oh, I like this color.
The tile, these are the bathrooms, so that's the outside of the tile, of the bathroom. And then the next one, that's the inside tile. So, and then the bathroom, there's the boys and the girls. That color pattern is kind of reversed in the other bathroom.
Who picked the tile colors?
The architect.
An architect always
A
does.
lot of
Who's the architect?
FFKR.
FFK. I like it.
I like it too.
We've heard mixed.
It's all right, I'll like it. I love bold things that I would never put in my house, but would be in the school bathroom.
I would put that in my house.
Okay, all right, good job.
Second floor, drywall is done. Mechanical is 99% done. Oh, on the first floor this morning, we did get the fire marshal, did an inspection this morning to pass off above the ceiling fire.
Nice.
So ceiling grid will start going in next week. Then the third floor, looking south, looking north, yeah, the drywallers are coming quick behind them. They're just barely getting framed over there. And then mechanical is going in and electrical just moving up from each floor. Any other questions on Wasatch? Shoreline. Furniture is moving on July 1st, moving in. So, ready or not.
Oh, did you say July?
July
1st?
1st is when furniture is scheduled to start being installed. Pretty much all the site concrete is done. They just are covering it as they're still moving around dirt, getting the irrigation in, and then we'll be seeing sod in the next couple of weeks. Next one. This is the big fill. The irrigation lines are starting to get in, so it's leveled. And now we'll get the irrigation in, ready to put the sod on. Just another closer look there, all that going on. Same thing here. Sod will be going in as soon as that's done, and they're ready to put it all in at once. Inside, I think we did talk about the millwork having a little bit of a delay. It's a best guess every month of what's going to be delayed for the month with construction right now. And millwork apparently was one, but it wasn't too bad. The only thing that's holding it up is the countertops. I haven't been able to get those in yet. The sinks, these are all the sinks here ready to go. Flooring is done, ceiling's done, electrical done, everything's done. Worst case, they're telling it, they've said it won't be a delay, won't cause any problems, but furniture will be able to work around it, even if it's not in yet. So that's a blurry picture, but this is the administration office looking out into the learning stair in the commons area. Same thing, missing the countertop still. They had to, and same thing, this is a teacher's workroom. They have to get all the cabinets in and complete before they can cut the templates to measure the size of the countertops. So the gym floor is in, so over the next couple of weeks it's going to be finished and painted. Auditorium seats are in, 650 seats.
Looks so good.
Roll-up doors, so this is just separating the commons on that side to the cafeteria on this side. So it's just kind of the final pieces, the ceiling going into the commons. This is that hallway up above the commons. I like the ceiling detail they have going on there. This was the last of the hallway. There's still missing flooring, so that's in now. So it's just kind of final touch up, balance and commissioning, making all the mechanical systems balanced. So questions? Okay, tip view. Tip view has been, it's been a crunch to try to get everything ready for the master plan, and we're trying to do everything we can. Work is still progressing. The sidewalk, this was our main water line we got connected last week. The sidewalk and the front along the street is going in. Happens to be at the same time that the city is redoing that street. So this is the water line, so they're starting to get on the site, putting in the site utilities now. They've already brought in compaction in this area here where the new auditorium would be, that is suitable for a building, not just a parking lot. So that's in and being done. Now they're going back in and digging for the utility lines. This is a water line. That's not going to conflict with anything. The biggest conflict that we found was the stormwater, which we were able to catch and give them direction to reroute it over here and then lower the depth over here to not conflict with another time. Yep, yeah, so that's in progress. One we talked about last time was tearing down this cafeteria wall. We missed that one. So we'll just have to tear it down from the inside when we get to that. Next one. So, footings and foundation, piers, everything done. The North Gym wrestling and dance area here. You can see the utility tunnel, again, utilities going in there. Next one. And this is, yeah, the masonry was not supposed to start until June 20th, actually started last week, so got a good jump start on that, but that's why we couldn't tear down that wall. They're already building a new wall there. Yeah, just more of the masonry detail. So it's progressing. The site, the power and electrical underneath there is a little behind, but it's not. This masonry is what's the critical path to get that up to get structural, so it's moving ahead of schedule. The football field will be ready.
I'm stressed about
All
it.
caps will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as we're concerned, the only thing we're still missing, we need to do, the fire marshal wants this pathway fully lit up during games, so it sounds like we'll be fine just using some. The contractor already put some here, but they were short, so we need about 4 or 5 more down along here that can just be the mobile solar powered lights we'll just put on and turn on during games. Then the press box is still planning to come at the end of the month. And I think that's it.
Can you remind me, how far does the current construction project have to go before they can open up so they can use the learning stairs in the commons area?
Till the end of February, mid-February.
So they have to get all the walls up for the gym and everything. Okay.
We can see, let me look into it, because the way they schedule now is the same mechanical contractors coming to do the dance areas and the gym and the wrestling and the commons all at the same time. If we can get them to come sooner to get that open, but the plan has always been at the same time as the rest of it in February. And
If it's ready sooner,
if it's ready sooner,
that would help the school a lot to have that
It
space
really would.
open
Okay.
and to get rid of the plywood hallways.
yes. Because we are anxious to get going on the cafeteria as well, but we can't do it until that's open and those plywood hallways are gone.
Yeah.
But we met out there with the structural engineer last week. They're putting the plans and the details together to get that all upgraded now while it's closed, so they don't have to close it down later. So that should be happening this summer, while we're also re-roofing it. So while the roof is off, it's going to be a lot cheaper and easier for them to get in there and do the structural work. Of the commons.
Commons.
Oh,
Yes.
what kind of upgrade are you talking about?
The connections of the beams to the walls.
I see. In order to do whatever comes next.
That's more for, so the commons in the current work in progress, the commons did not get a seismic retrofit. And so now that we have determined that the roof just needs to be replaced, while the roof is off, we're going to go ahead and make those connections to the beams and the columns
so that
up at the top. Yeah.
Any other questions for Chad? All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
All right. Item number 7, Heather Lane and Osprey Town's report on the community meetings.
Will you pull up, Bonnie, it's the boundary discussion, it's entitled Boundary Discussion 6.11 of 2024.
I only have the PDF version.
That's fine. That'll be fine. We'll make it work. I put in to board docs just a summary of what has, I think both of her computers.
Melanie, do you want to flip?
Oh yeah.
We got you.
There we go. It's like, who are you
Okay.
talking
I'm good.
So in board docs, I created just a little summary of kind of what has taken place with Osprey Towns Park and Heather Lane. So last Thursday we did a community meeting at Sunset View. for the Osprey Towns Park area to receive feedback from the community, and we had a lot of district people there and no community members. And then we did one last night at Franklin Elementary for Heather Lane, and the same thing happened. But we figured that because there's there's basically 7 students total that are being affected across both of these areas by this discussion. So that's not surprising. So I just wanted to remind you of kind of what the recommendations or what the options are that Jared has talked with you about. So Heather Lane, you can see is, well, maybe I do need to turn Melanie around. Sorry, now she's getting turned around. Can you see? Okay, good. Okay, so Heather Lane is right before the boundary went down the middle of the street, so people on this side, right, we're going to one elementary school. The ones on this side are going to Spring Creek, and the ones on this side are going to Franklin. So the idea is to bring it so it's either in Sunset View boundary or the Spring Creek boundary. So this is the option showing Spring Creek. That's one option. Scroll up. Then the next option would be we could put it into Sunset View. That's the recommendation that Troy and district leadership is making, and we would continue. So these are representing students. We would continue to provide transportation for any student that is currently receiving transportation to a school. We would continue to do that until they phase out. But if we get like a new kindergartner that comes in, then that's where the boundary will be. We need to acknowledge that this boundary will likely be readdressed in the boundary and feasibility study. So this is going to be for the next school year, based on your recommendations. Do you have questions about this? Go ahead.
The only one, if there's a sibling, like if they have a sibling that's coming up, will that also be grandfathered in, or are we gonna have siblings going to different schools?
So we usually will I don't know, we would have to look at
Figure it out.
We'll have to figure it out.
Hopefully it's not an issue.
I hope it isn't either, because I don't want those kids to be going to different schools, but I also don't want to keep running, because then we're just running a bus forever and ever. So the next, if you scroll up, then Osprey Towns Park, you'll notice are all of these, they're basically townhomes here. So the boundary comes right here. So Franklin is up here, and Sunset View is down here. So that splits like a home right in half. So the recommendation that's coming from Jared and Troy is that we just take this area, the Osprey Towns Park development, and we put it all into Franklin Elementary. Franklin Elementary has the space. There are currently no children that are enrolled in school that are living there. I asked Terry about this last night because it made sense in my mind that we would run the boundary kind of like this around, so that we would pull these 4 houses into the Franklin boundary. And Terry, do you want to share with everybody what you told me last night?
Just that those backyards it's pretty distinct line, and those houses are very separate from the townhouses. They don't blend together.
So I'm guessing that this house, because of where the house number is, all of these are in Sunset Views, and then everything here is Franklin, unless they're choicing into a different school.
Starting where? Starting at that old line
this
right
line
there.
right here.
So that home that's split in half chooses, or?
So it depends on which side that house number is, so I'd have to look at that to see where. I don't think there's any children living there, so we would just put them based on wherever their driveway is where that's going to be. One of the things you could choose to do is you could choose to run the boundary this way down here and just move those 4 homes into Franklin as well, so that you don't have that. But the recommendation that was made was just to deal with this particular development here.
And do we bus
And you
anyone
see all
there?
the dirt? Those are going to be townhouses.
Right.
Yeah, these are all going to be.
Do we bus right now from this area? to
Yeah,
either
they're
school?
all bused.
In both directions?
Yeah. They're far enough away.
They're not within walking distance
So
of
in
either
terms
school.
of those
So
4 houses right there, so.
There's no students.
there's no students in there.
Right, but would a bus route come, I guess I'm just trying to.
They just go with the neighborhood that's just to our left there north.
Okay, okay. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay, next. Scroll down. So our next steps are in our business, before our business meeting, we'll have a public hearing for public input. Continue to gather feedback, and then the final vote on the potential boundary changes would be on June 25th, with this going into effect in August of this year, 2024. Questions? Okay. There, I think I did that in less than 10 minutes, maybe.
You did.
Whew.
6 minutes. Good job. All right. Thank you. Item number 8, fraud risk assessment report, and we'll turn over to our, that is wrong, business administrator, Devin Bailey.
Oh yeah. I could be a dual personality.
There you go.
Same personality, really, just different jobs. So on here you have our fraud risk assessment. We do this every year. It just basically gauges our risk based on their determination of what causes risk. And so there we have, I mean, I don't know that there is ever a perfect organization that has no chance for risk, but we've put enough processes and controls in place that our risk for fraud is fairly low. So that's what that is. It's just required to be presented to you. There's nothing to vote on, just so that you know what our fraud risk is based on the state auditor's determination of what fraud risk is. We're going to meld the next two parts together because I think that they'll go together well.
First, are there any questions about the fraud risk
Sorry.
assessment? Am I reading this right? We have a perfect score. Good job. Okay, go ahead. We're going to go to items number 9 and 10, budget discussion and truth and taxation.
Can you bring this? I don't have to run back and forth between my computer. And I'll go here and turn Melanie around.
I feel like that's the most exercise I've had in a long time.
Hey, shall I turn you around a few more times and let's see how high we can get your heart rate?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to blend the truth and taxation discussion in with the budget discussion because it goes together well. My recommendation, and this will be a board decision, is that we do not do truth and taxation this year. And I will give you a lot of my reasonings and the numbers as we go. Is it not coming up? And the presentation is mostly the same. I've added a couple of new slides to give you a little bit more information, especially on some of the larger purchases for technology.
I love that.
So that you could see some of those specific items that Chad's done a lot of work on to get initial quotes. You know, if those change, we'll come back and update that information. But the approval of the budget would also approve those so that we don't have to come back for every single item. So that's sometimes helpful. If the board would prefer us to come back every time, we can also do that. That's totally fine. Okay, so let's start digging in. So right now, again, the county has changed our numbers still a few times over the last week, but I think we're starting to get to the final number. So right now our final rate is the 007284, which is a little lower than the last year. This is where kind of
So the 7284 is different than 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
It was actually different this morning, but I manipulated it back to the 7284 because the county, I don't know what the county's doing. I just know that they have moved our numbers several times. So the 7284 is our number. So let me give you a little bit of information on that. So, and this will lend into our truth and taxation number. Now this number is higher overall than the last year, only for 2 reasons. One reason is growth. Our city did experience growth this year on new properties and new taxable entities. And the basic rate that's set by the state is higher this year than it was in prior years. So when you go in and look at our tax rate entry, you have the amount that you're allowed to charge in taxes, which is what last year's taxes were for the three basic, the voted levy, the basic, or the board levy, the voted levy, and your capital levy. So those three rates, the amount is calculated off of what we brought in the prior year. And then they add in, then we put in the amount that we need for our debt collection for that year. And then they also will go in and enter in the basic rate. That is not entered yet. The state, I don't know, it's taking them a little bit longer, but we've already been told what that rate is preliminarily. They've never changed it before, so I'm going to go off of this is likely our final rate that we will be charging.
Are you sure?
You know, Terry, there is never 100% certainty in anything, but I would say there's a 99.9% certainty that this number will not change. But I have to give myself the 0.1. Yes.
The way we calculate it, though, if I remember correctly, is that it's so we can bring in the same amount we brought in
Correct.
last
But
year
with
in those three categories?
Correct, and
Yeah.
those three categories are exactly the same. The differences are the state rates that come in, plus whatever they decide extra to give to charter schools, which also kind of threw a wrench into the rates this year. Because in the last couple of years, our rates have been 4 zeros with a 9.6 and 4 zeros with a 9.8. This year it went up to 3 zeros and a 1.24, so it actually went up 35% from the year before. And no one can seem to give me the answer of why our amount went up more percentage-wise than a lot of our surrounding districts. But
Or the
part of
charter
that is the number of charter schools that we have in the city and the number of students that attend charter schools. But so the amount of our revenue that is going, and it comes directly off of the top of the amount of revenue that we can charge for. So our total amount that is our maximum is 57 million, which is with our debt service and with our capital, without the amount that the state is putting in as the basic rate. And then as soon as they decide what the revenue amount is, then they calculate the rate. And so part of this rate is that amount that the county has determined that they are pulling out of our taxes to give to the charter schools. So a couple of other things. You can see our valuation went up this year again. 90% of residential homes in the county actually dropped in value this year again. Most of the growth, most of this $500 million in growth was high density housing, which the valuation is still increasing substantially in those, and our commercial properties. So our businesses and our apartment complexes and condos and things, they're paying more of the property taxes. So a lot of our residents will see a decrease in their property taxes this year. It won't be substantial because there's not a lot of room to move. When you're looking at the smaller districts, there's less of a base of what the valuation is. So when you compare us with Alpine has $56 billion of value. And depending on which community you're from, the tax rates will be dependent on wherever, what that valuation is. The rates for this district will stay the same, but what residents and commercial buildings will pay is different. So our rates are always generally going to be higher than some of the larger entities because we have a smaller tax base. For example, on the other side you have Tooele, that's really close to our size, but their valuation is right around $8.1 billion. And their rates are they're just over 008. So the valuation of the homes and businesses really do play into the amount of what our property taxes look like. And so, why ours is a little bit higher than some of the larger districts because they have a bigger base to charge on. So as we were going through a lot of the rates and looking at it, we had a couple of ideas. We could bring our rates up so that they were the same. as this year, which would require truth in taxation, but it would only bring in about $450,000 more. And so it's not a big enough difference to go through the process when next year we're going to need to likely go through truth in taxation to do more with teacher salaries and some of the other salaries within the district. And so this year it kind of gives a little bit of a reprieve, especially as the valuations of homes are evening out a little bit more. And depending on what the economy does, depending on who you listen to, it could be a little bit more different next year.
I have a question about that. Does
Yeah.
that, like, with the city, like, does that put us in a hard spot where we're then looking at truth in taxation at the same time as the city potentially next year?
It is always possible. They have not determined whether they are going to truth in taxation this year. The last thing I heard was the council was supposed to meet at the end of last week and the beginning of this week. I haven't heard what those final results were, but their property tax rates are so small that there isn't really a good way to compare them to ours, because theirs is less than a 0001 or a 0006. I think it's a 580 or something. So theirs is a lot smaller, but they have sales tax. They have a lot of the fees, that they use for the basic operating revenue, where we don't have that. And the fees that we can charge are also legislated, so there's less that we can charge, and still the same services that we are trying to provide. So there's a couple of other things that we can do. One of the recommendations that I know has been talked about before is increasing our maximum voted levy. So this year we received about $1 million extra in state revenue with the loophole of shifting our tax rates to the board levy as opposed to the capital levy. And we did bring in additional revenue, but the state closed that loophole this year. They noticed that we brought in more, and so made it impossible for that to happen again. The only way for that extra revenue to come in is by increasing that voted levy and then decreasing the board levy the same amount, and that would bring in about $1 million extra each year when you lower it. But if you could increase that and then do the truth in taxation at the same point, then you have a little bit extra that you can play with. That play with is the wrong word, but that you can work with on the budget for next year. Any questions? Is there anything else you want to know about taxes? I mean, it's a word that nobody likes, but it still is the one way that we have to be able to run the district. And so it will be, I can't imagine, unless something happens where we have a lot of education friendly people get on the legislature and increase our WPU significantly next year. It really will need to happen next year. Okay. And again, this is our comparison from one year to the other. You can see this is the basic that's set by the state, and that's the 1406, and this year it's 1484. And then our voted stays the same. This is our board, so this amount I decreased in order to bring this back up to the 13 increments. And then this is our charter school. You can see the significant difference between one year and another. This will give the charter schools about $1.2 million instead of the $900,000 that they've gotten over the last few years, or what they've budgeted to be received. Then you have our capital. And this just is reflective completely of the valuation of homes, and so we can have a lower rate because our valuation total is higher to bring in the same amount of revenue this year or next year as we did this year. And then again, our debt, even though we're bringing in more, again, it goes down because the valuation is higher and we don't need millions of dollars more. We're just about at the max that we will be asking for the next few years until we decide on another bond. Okay. And so this shows overall it's $2 less per $100,000 of evaluation of a home. This is based on $100,000. So $100,000 it would bring in about $401 per 100,000, and then you can see each of the individual This one includes all the rest of the levies, the blue, and then the orange is our debt. And you can see it moves. Most of this is based on valuation, so you can see our debt service payments haven't changed a ton, the amount, but you can see that the amount that comes in per 100,000 has changed because valuations of all of the properties in Provo have changed. Okay, let's keep going.
Devin?
Yeah.
Devin, that 401 number is on a 55% value?
Yep, that's the
valuation?
55% of the $100,000. Yep.
Okay.
And then this is our interest revenue. You know, if you listen to economists right now, we're looking at a possible dramatic change in some of that interest, and so right now that's something that's always a little scary for me to budget on, because you can see how deeply it can be impacted based on the economic condition of where we are. So we've been able, that's where we've done a lot of our one-time stuff for negotiations this year, to be able to at least start that process of bringing those salaries up. But that's not, I mean, I hope it keeps going like that, and the interest keeps coming in, but it's been a while, so I don't plan on that continuing on forever. Okay, and again, our WPU, the amount this next year is $4,494 per student. It's a 5% increase. We don't have the official inflation numbers because we're only in June, but right now we're looking at about 4.5% is what I'm seeing on most places, which they gave us about 3.5%. So they're not giving it. I don't know which inflation numbers they're using, but they're not quite making up the difference. And when you look at inflation for the last few years, we still haven't caught up to what things have cost more over the last few years.
They use a metric where they take like 5 years or something, average it.
And when you look at 2019-20 still being included with a 1.2% inflation, it does bring the average down. Okay. And this is our enrollment. Our enrollment is looking fairly flat. So about 13,477 is what we are projecting based on the normal fluctuation of our schools. Steve did an amazing job getting all of those numbers put together so we could at least have a pretty good idea. Now that could change. I don't. When you look at the map that they sent out of who got Utah Fits All, it's not really clear. You just know that there was some in Provo that got it, but whether they were already not enrolled, we don't have that information. All right. So now we get into the nitty gritty. So this is our budget for FY25. On the next page, we'll talk about FY24 because this also is an approval for the final budget for this year. So we have the expenses of $253 million across all funds, and also included are some transfers to other between funds, but that nets to zero. So when you look at each of the individual functions and the individual funds, you can see each of those there. So when you have community members say, well, it looks like you're being super irresponsible with your money because you're going down in your fund balance, you know, you're spending more than you bring in. That is because when you look at our beginning fund balances, so this is a good example. This is our Municipal Building Authority fund. All of the money that came in from the bond has been sitting in that fund for the last few years, and we've been spending it. We don't recognize revenue for each year. We recognize it at the beginning, and then we spend it. So when you're looking at it and people say, well, you're overspending every year, it's because we've had bond proceeds for the last 4 years that we've been spending. As you start getting into the next few years, you'll start seeing that be different unless we do another bond, and then we'll continue on with that same trend. So any questions on any specific funds? What they're for? I think we've been through it several times, and I think for the most part, everybody understands how that is accounted for in our district. So let's go to the next one. This is a comparison of this year and the final budget for the projected for next year and the final for this year. So you can see our expenses are down about $55 million, but that's because our projects are starting to come to a close, and it's a lot of just the final work, where you can see that a lot of the contract for Shoreline has been paid. Those draws every month are a little bit smaller, or will become a little bit smaller, because it's just the final steps of it, and plus the retention that we hold out. So, and you can see the differences between each of our, and this is including all funds. So your capital funds are in here along with food services and all of those funds. Most of these are going to be just the general fund, because except for the capital outlay is there. So these up here are mostly there in the general fund. And you can see this year's $104 million and the next year's $102. A lot of that is just the decrease in our ESSER funding and some of the different things we've had to do in order to make up the difference. But any questions on this one? Okay. I keep wanting to go up and change Melanie's page, but thanks, Bonnie.
Bonnie's got it.
So this is all of the funds again by the different types of the objects. So you can see a significant portion of our expenses are always going to, when we're in the middle of building, are always going to land within our salaries, benefits, and purchase services. So purchase services is everything from substitute teachers to repairs and buildings, and your travel and field trips and all of the student items that fall within that. So most of our expenses always land in those. Any questions? I think we're getting close. Well, now we're doing fund by fund. So this is our general fund. So you can see the 173 includes our ESSER funding. It includes the additional interest revenue. There's several things in there that we won't receive again. So you can see the difference, about $12 million less in revenue between one year and the next. But then on the flip side, you can see that our expenses are not as different, and we have a little bit less of a transfer to make up the difference. So this transfer here is for two things. One is to the capital fund to help pay for the debt. It goes to the capital fund, and then the capital fund has an expense called a lease expense that goes then to the municipal building authority. It's all kind of fun accounting, but that's what that $6 million transfer is. And so there's less capital money available this year for projects because we needed to decrease that in order to make everything work within the general fund. Not a lot. There's still enough to do most of the requests that came in, and at least the key requests. So you can see overall that our increase in our fund balance this year is going to cover some of those one-time things that we've talked about a few times, so that we didn't have to go out for truth and taxation this year and could use the resources that we already got available. So this is the general fund, and it's just a 5-year look at the expenses. And so this year is always going to stand out as a really weird anomaly of a year, just because of the increased federal funding that we've had over the lot. Because you can see it, a $12 million difference and then a $9 million. We're having to course correct a little bit more to make sure that we're not so dependent on the one-time federal dollars that come in.
And is that, sorry, let me go back.
No, you're good.
Is that why there's when you look at the net change in fund balance, you look at 2020, 21, and then you look at last year, those two are dissimilar from the
Correct. So this is COVID.
Yeah.
So this year there was a lot of money that couldn't be spent because we didn't have people in schools. There was a lot of things that were waiting to be done that we couldn't do this year, but there was some of that carried over into this year, which is why you have the net change being negative, because there was there was supply chain issues where they couldn't come in, and the computers were late getting here because there wasn't anybody working. Everybody was at home with COVID, and so it will always fluctuate like this because of, like this year you're going to see probably an even bigger increase than this when we get everything closed, because there were things that came in even higher than what I was expecting a month ago. But the expenses are what the expenses are. And this is just a graphical, this is what each function is in the general fund. So you can see instruction's gone down just a little bit like we saw with the decrease in ESSER. And then you can see a lot of the school administration went up just a little bit, but that was about a normal increase, plus we added assistant principals. And then some of our other ones stayed mostly flat. Transportation is up just a little bit because of the increased bus routes with with Shoreline. But everything else is about where you would expect it to be. This increase in instructional staff is the coaches at the schools. And then you can see some of our district administration went down just because we were making sure people were assigned with what their actual duties entailed. So, all right. And this just shows what our fund balance you can see goes up here, stays about the same, goes down a little bit. That is because part of the natural spend down is our OPEB. So we had a fund balance that was specifically saved for our OPEB benefits, and we've hit a sunset where we can start pulling from that in order to pay for those benefits for our retirees that have been retired for a while. And then I believe the next one is some of those large purchases. So you can see a lot of these are technology related. Chad really loves to spend money. And I only say that because he's here. So you can see a lot of them are just our normal rotation for switches, for cameras, the computers for employees, the computers for students, for our one-to-one. And then here's the annual amount for our Google Workspace that we've talked about a few times, along with this is the basic Power School that we normally have. That does not include what the board has already approved for next year. The 95% group, this is the cost about for our annual licenses for our elementary schools, our ERP and Domo, and a lot of our the maintenance agreements for the other ones. So, yes.
I'm just curious about the Domo, like how often and how much is it used, and in terms of adding value?
It's used quite a bit. We'd like to grow that a little bit more because it's a lot easier for principals and secretaries to follow, especially as you're looking at your full budget and all the programs. It's really a good way to look at it graphically. I mean, it's a lot prettier. And we're working on getting all the secretaries on this year. So right now it's only been principals, and I know the elementary schools use it pretty heavily. And as we go out, as Steve and Woody go out to our schools to meet with them, we'll make sure that they know how to log in. Unfortunately, the negative part is I haven't had as much time the last few months to get more information in there and to.
What?
I know I should take a little bit more time, but I am making sure that it's utilized well and that we have really good information out there. I mean, the information out there is really great. It's not anything bad. It's just there's more information that we could get that can provide a lot more data to you and to our principals to be able to make better. And we could definitely do a Domo workshop. We're planning on doing something like that for our principals and our secretaries so that they can know, because the dashboards I've created are great. It's just getting people to use them and figuring. There's a couple of bugs in Excel that isn't connecting anymore, so all the changes I need to make, I've had to wait until we can get that solved. So, and again, that just takes a little bit of time.
So just to kind of add to that, we had a really great meeting in our MTSS group today where we started looking at each of our schools' data, and actually by school, comparing it with the district and the state and whatnot. And so the question that came up was, okay, so if I'm a teacher and I see that I had 2 students who came in proficient and then they dropped as a result, can we drill down and see who those 2 students are so that we're sending that information on to the next grade level? And Nate made it very clear that with the new Power School modules, that will communicate with Domo. Domo will give us the drill down capability of that. So a piece of this is this data piece is going to take probably 3 years for us to, because it's going to take a lot of training and support to get to that space. But he was like, oh yeah, that will talk back and forth.
Yeah, and we'll be able to have that API put together so that we can get that data back and forth, which is one of the reasons why having the data is so important, so we can actually make more individualized decisions for students. Yes.
My question is probably for Chad.
Ah.
But I see that Provost touch panel replacements are up there. Provost has had 6 school years. That seems really soon to be replacing that. Is that normal?
Our normal cycle is about 7 years. That specific model, we've had all kinds of problems with.
So
but
we had
typically they last about 7 years. So that's what we hope for, is 7 years.
Okay.
And that's what we expect to get out of the new panels. But some of these older panels were a little bit. Yeah.
So we had to replace already at
We've
Rock
replaced
Canyon
Sunset View and
Sunset
yep,
View.
so
Okay.
some of those newer schools that are newer, we've had to replace this year.
Okay.
So
Just seems
but generally,
Technology.
one thing I know about Chad is he will make something work as long as possible.
Okay.
And so he won't replace something unless it's really necessary to replace.
I assumed
so
that. I was just curious if that was normal.
I always appreciate that about Chad, because he doesn't typically waste money. So, all right, let's go to the next one. Okay, was that?
Nobody heard that.
What did you say?
He said typically.
Okay, there have been a few times when I've questioned the $20 to $5 he spent on something, but you know, $25, what are you going to do? Not really. He does a great job. Okay, so this is our Provo Education Foundation, and this is the Education Foundation is a separate entity, but because it's so closely related, we report it as a discretely presented component unit, which is just a fancy way of saying they're closely enough related that we have to report them just on our government-wide. So when we're doing our presentation of our financial statements, we don't add the foundation to that. They're separate. And you can see that if you ever read one of the CAFRs, or ACFRs, sorry, that's always going to come out. So generally, we'll put in a significant amount in the revenue and expenses, and I think that's just living on the hope that someone's going to come in and give us $1 million, which hasn't happened yet. So I'm not sure when that's going to happen. But you know, if we shoot a little smaller, maybe we'll get a little closer. So, all right. Our student activity fund. So this is where all of our fees come for our schools. You'll find here a lot of the fees will go down, not next year, but the year after, because of the decrease in the ability to charge general fees and the curricular fees and co-curricular fees, with some exceptions. But all of the expenses also come out of here. So that's what this fund is. And generally, they brought in a couple of years of increased amount, and so they're spending that slowly, and that's why you see a decrease in the fund balance. All right, let's keep going, because I have now taken my 30 minutes allotted. So this is our pass-through taxes. This is really just that charter school levy that comes in, and it is the amount for our RDAs. So, and then this is our municipal building authority. Again, you'll see that the amounts are for just the building of Shoreline and Wasatch. You'll notice the $6 million is the QSCB bond balance. So this next year, not in 25, but in 26, that will pay off. So you'll see an expense in there of $6.4 million as the payoff for that bond, because it's been sitting in a sinking fund, and that sinking fund, will pay it off as soon as they call it. And then this, you'll see again, this is our responsibility of spending money that we don't have, but we really do. And you can see that that balance is right where I would expect it to be. This is our debt service fund. So you'll notice a couple of transfers out. So when we sometimes collections end up a little higher than what was planned, and we only need to bring in what those expenses are for, and you can only spend it on debt and technology. So that actually will help pay for some of those technology needs that are on Chad's list without having to do an increase in our taxes based on. But this is also something that is not necessarily guaranteed. We don't know what that collection rate will be each year, but it gives us that ability to use it for. Those are the only two things you can use it for is debt and technology.
Why is it just technology? I'm curious.
That it's legislated.
Okay.
It is specific in law that your proceeds in your municipal building authority can't be spent on new buildings. It can be spent on paying off debt or technology. And a lot of the times, I think a lot of municipalities, I know when I worked at the city, we would lease fire trucks and ambulances.
Oh.
And so they could spend it on those instead of going out and leasing them and using that debt service for paying for it. And then this is just these are based on our balances. So this is, you can see in 2041 is when our last year of our payments are, and then the amount is based on which issuance it is. So let's keep going. This is capital projects. This year you'll see this is the most of the spend down of 10th View. This will include the rest of it. Some of it is double counted because we don't know if it is going to come in this year or next year. And if I don't have it budgeted in this year and it comes in, then we can get a finding for being over budget. So, and again, these are our projects for this year. You'll see this one is the $750,000, and that part of it will be spent out of this year on the savings from the makeup air units that I sent the email about, and then the rest of it, that $750,000 will be out of next year's budget, and that's what we're approving. And then just our normal replacement, and so our bus replacement, we do that 3 of them a year to keep on cycle, so we don't have old buses and just what we need for playgrounds. That's the port and play. So there's the items that if a playground is getting old, that's where that money would come from. So you can see there's a lot of those changes across the board at several of our schools and at the district office. And then this is our food services fund. This is a standalone fund. This is one that is completely funded by federal reimbursements and by the state liquor tax. I did get an email just a couple days ago that the state is shaving off part of our reimbursement for state liquor to do some of the admin costs at the State Office of Education. So I don't know what that's going to look like next year, but they have pulled some of our reimbursement for their admin at the state office. Right now I don't plan on a huge change, but when you talk about 2 cents per lunch and you have thousands of lunches, it'll add up at the end. Let's go back real quick. So you can see these are planned spend downs. So because they have too much money, which is a problem that I guess would be great to have, but we do get findings if we keep that up. And we have to have it all. This likely will go up as she brings me specific needs that she's buying, or this will go down. It'll get more negative because we'll have the rest of that spend down. We really are only supposed to have 3 months of revenue, which is right around $1.5 million that we're supposed to have. Okay. And then this is our self-insurance fund. I wish that I had more of a trend I could provide for you, but it does already look like we are saving money on our but what we haven't seen is most of our pharmacy rebates for the year. I know for 1 month it was close to 100,000, so I have to project what that's going to be and then book it as a receivable so that it'll show, so I have it in the right period. But this is the amount of our premiums that we plan to receive, and this represents the 5% increase for the employers and the employer and the employee part. And then this represents the other 6% that the district is covering, so that we weren't impacting employees quite as often, or quite as much. Okay, all done.
Great. Thank you, Devin.
Any other questions? We'll see if
Alright.
there's any public comment, and otherwise we'll vote on it in the business meeting.
And remind me, is this, I know it's in board docs, but is it linked somewhere on the website?
Yep,
if
it
someone-
should be on the
Okay.
website. Shauna put it out there for me a few weeks ago so that it was available for
That's what I
public to
had.
look
I
at.
just wanted to-
All right. Sorry, I put us a little bit further behind.
Thank you. Well, we gotta talk about things. It's important. So, okay. Number 11, collective bargaining agreements. Deputy Superintendent Jason Collins.
Good evening. We have the 3 agreements with you in front of you today. We have the 2 from the associations and then the admin agreement. The process for this was similar to in the past. We've worked with the associations throughout the year to try to build as much consensus, so going into negotiations there wasn't a lot of new other than trying to figure out where the finances would go based on the recent legislative session. Devin and Wendy did a great job being a part of the negotiation process this year. They were very helpful in helping us move things together forward. We worked very closely with the 2 associations, and so we have those 2 agreements ready for you to accept and approve tonight. And after this will then move us into pushing out calendars for the coming school year, employee calendars, all those kinds of things will come next.
You wanna just say what the overall?
Summarize the changes.
Yeah.
It depends on the group.
It's each group,
Yeah.
so it's a little bit different for each group. I'll hit some highlights. How's that?
That'd be great.
So the
Just
highlights
for our public
for
who's not
yeah,
on board
so
docs right
you
now.
bet. So the highlights for the teacher group is that they're getting their lane advancement or their step advancement and their increase. There's also, I think, the best part of their agreement was the longevity portion that Devin was able to work through with the association, where people who've been employees specifically in Provo for a certain period of time then get an increase, a number of steps increase based on the number of years that they've been here. And so some people will experience an increase of, close to $12,000 based on this, just on this one negotiated agreement. So again, this is where we appreciate the work that she's doing. I think the rest of that agreement is very similar to in the past. We've worked with them on the committees and different working condition type things, but there wasn't a lot new. We did mention one of the items earlier, just stressing the importance of a duty-free lunch, the 30 minutes, working with the schools to block out the 35 minutes for the lunch period. Then moving into the classified association, they also received their steps and a percentage increase, and they will also be receiving a longevity type increase based on the number of people that are in their group and who have been here for a number of years with us. So that's the other positive for that group. I believe that's again pretty much it for theirs as far as changes overall. The rest are typical working conditions type agreements that we've had in the past of having committees that we will meet together with on a monthly basis and work together to be collaborative.
Yeah, there were a few job classes that moved specific to job duties that we had, but for the most part it was pretty standard to what we normally do.
Yeah, in fact, I'm glad you mentioned that. So we did have some increases for our custodial group. So there was some work on that. And again, I think every year when we work on specific groups, it's all about how hard is it to hire the right people for those jobs, and then we look at those specific jobs to try to help benefit, making sure we have the right people on board. The last group, the admin group, they also got their step increase, and in fact for this year, Devin has created a single lane schedule for each of the different groups that are part of this negotiated agreement. We have 4 different groups of employees that are part of that association for that agreement portion. So she created different salary schedules for each of them. It's now a single lane step or single lane for each of those groups. We also, she was able to work out a percentage increase and then a one-time pay that'll be paid to those employees in November for this coming year. And otherwise, things, again, stay pretty much similar beyond that.
I had a question
You bet.
on the admin. It's on page 2 with lane 4. It says Oak Springs, but shouldn't it say Slate Mountain?
Yes, so we still have them in our system as 2 different schools just because of the way that they're organized in Power School. So one's on a semester, on a term, one's on a trimester, and so we have to keep them separate to keep the days and the grading a little bit more even. So when we merge the information to the state, it's all reported as Slate Mountain. But in our records, they're still separate entities, but we can reflect that as Slate Mountain.
Which one does the trimesters?
Slate Mountain's not even
Uh,
Yeah.
Oak Springs, I believe, and then Slate Canyon has summer terms as well, which they actually record, and so there are.
No, I'm just worried because last legislative session, they tried to get rid of trimesters, but if it's working, then if they try to do it again,
It's different when it's a child in care situation.
Okay.
Yeah, an alternative setting. We have a couple of different.
On a traditional school, it is that they have made moves to change it, but
and they'll be safe no matter what.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's supported by the state, so most of the funding for those 2 places come from the state. The education portion comes through us.
Okay.
All right, any other questions for Jason?
I just want to say
I have
thank you.
a couple of questions.
Do hers.
Okay,
yeah.
Melanie.
Jason, first question, our starting salary is close to around 57,000, something like that.
Yep.
Where does that end us with other districts?
So I just looked on there today, on the state website, the reporting. We're still a little bit behind. We put a little bit more of an emphasis in trying to do the middle of the salary schedule. When you do the negotiation each year, you can look at 3 different portions of the schedule. The beginning, which, you can put a lot of emphasis there. You can put emphasis on the ending salary or somewhere in the middle. And the middle portion is the most costly portion typically. And this year we did focus on that. So we came up some on the entry level salary. We are behind our other 2 districts because of the emphasis we put in on the middle of the salary schedule this year.
Okay, thank you. My other question is on the certified classified, I don't know which one it was. It talks about the grandfathered employees. Can you explain to me who our grandfathered employees are?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually, years ago, there was an OPEB agreement, which is a post-retirement benefit agreement, where employees who had that benefit were called grandfathered employees, and they have a separate salary schedule that they still are a part of. There's only a handful of employees, like 4 left in the district, who are still on that schedule, but because we do have the 4, we have to represent them in the negotiated agreement. And that is a part of what Devin was talking about earlier when she talked about the sunsetting of the OPEB agreement. We had hundreds of those employees a few years back, and now we're down to 4 employees left.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
So what I just want to say, I want to say thank you to everyone who worked so hard on these agreements, but also I hope our teachers know that we really are trying to keep them here. We want to appreciate them and support them and also do what we can. So I'm really grateful that we're adding the work you did for longevity to sort of say to people, please stay in Provo and work with us and work with our students, and we want them to want to be here. And I'm just really grateful that this was at least something we could do right now. In an ideal world, we could catch up and be ahead of our neighbors, but I'm grateful for that.
And I feel like there's a part of us that needs to be right back at you. We thank you for your support of teachers. I think that's really key, so thank you.
Okay, anything else?
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason. And we'll be approving those in the business meeting later tonight. All right, caught up a little bit here. Now for item 12, we're gonna have Aurora Laura from our consulting group here for strategic plan first reading.
All right. Hi. Good to be back.
Hello.
All right, we ready?
Yep.
Great. Well, thank you all for having me back again. The team has been hard at work making some changes based on what we shared with you last time. So we're here to show you the revised version of the goals, strategies, and KPIs. But let's go ahead and just start it off. Quick refresher. Well, today what we're going to do is we'll look at the final core values, vision, and mission. We did not change them over what we shared with you last time, so we'll just have a quick refresher of those. Then we're going to show you the revised priorities. We took the 5 and narrowed it down to 3 based on the feedback, so you'll see how the team has kind of redivided those up and what they've now put as their goals, strategies, and KPIs. Get your feedback on those pieces, and then we'll talk to you about next steps. So let's go ahead and just quick refresher. I won't read to you the full definitions, but our core values that we've landed on: belonging, creativity, empowerment, growth, and community. And I'll just give you a moment to scan through just so you can refresh your memory.
And I did, Aurora, send this to all of the board members ahead of time, so they
Oh.
have been able
We've
to
read it.
review
Yeah.
the presentation too. So.
Okay, great. Then let's go ahead and quickly, our vision. Provo City School District is a vibrant learning environment where all students become lifelong learners and engaged community members.
Can I?
Oh,
This
yeah,
is
go
my
ahead.
only, I swear to you, my only wordsmithing
I
thing.
don't
And I
blame
know
you.
how much you all love wordsmithing. But I love this statement. I also want it to be like a little more like, So here's my only idea. It's so small. And I'm not going to feel one bit bad if you guys are like, no, I really won't. But I just wondered if we could say where all students are inspired to become lifelong learners and engaged community. I don't know if it matters. I don't know if it changes it. But I don't know. That's it. That's all I have to say. That's my wordsmithing plug. And maybe we want to do more than inspire them. Maybe they're going to, I didn't really dive in. I more just was trying to like make it a little more exciting.
Let's add an exclamation point to the end.
And it's some jazz hands.
No,
I don't know. Feel free to just, never mind. Move on. There, I said my
I think it's great. I think it only adds. I don't think it.
I'm thinking it through. I think it does add a little bit.
Doesn't make it too wordy. You really can't hurt my feelings. I'm unoffendable about this, I promise. I had to mock myself even, and I almost didn't say it, so feel free. Go at me. That was my only word.
I say add it.
It's fine.
Okay, keep going. Move on.
Let's
Sorry.
move to
That
the
was my
next.
only thing I promised.
Oh, so are we adding it?
No.
No?
What? No?
Send.
We're not enough to vote.
We just want to keep moving. That's
Yeah,
the only
move
thing.
on.
So send an email to board leadership and Wendy, and then they can figure
This
out.
is our first draft. So
Okay.
we can
Yeah, okay. Well, just let us
That's my only
know. Okay, mission. Welcome, educate, inspire. Any changes? No. All right. Okay.
Lisa's not going to say another word. No, I told you in advance. That was my only thing. I spent it all on that one little thing that was silly.
Okay, district priorities, goals, and strategies. So here's where the leadership team worked on making some changes. We took it from 5 and narrowed it down to 3. So academic achievement, stewardship of resources, and wellness and safety are the 3. And when we do the graphic design version, we'll take the opportunities for all and family and community engagement and show how those sort of wrap around the other 3. So let's go ahead and go to the next one. So for academic achievement, there are 2 goals. Increase the percentage of students achieving proficiency in core subjects by 15% within 5 academic years, and increase the percentage of students who meet college and career readiness benchmarks by 5% within 5 academic years. And the next slide has the actual strategies then and the KPIs for the first one. and then the next one has the second one. I don't know if we wanna go one by one with any feedback that you have.
Can you go back?
Sure, go ahead.
Next, okay. The only thing I would say is, make sure M, L, A, and S are explained out to the
Oh, sure.
community,
Yeah, for
because
sure.
no one's gonna know what you're
Yep.
talking about.
Okay.
Math, language, arts, science, yep.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah,
And then-
on the next one, I was trying to crack the code on that, like GR, oh yeah, graduation.
Oh, I was
Yeah.
like,
CW. Yeah.
Okay, any other feedback on this one?
Do you feel like that's ambitious enough?
Definitely.
Okay.
I do feel like in the strategies, I wondered, like, I feel like we already are using those strategies right now, so.
We haven't been measuring, we haven't
If
we
it's
haven't.
measuring, and then I guess just if
Accountability.
measuring doesn't grow it, right, like what will our strategies be?
And then we're gonna adapt the strategies, but we
Right,
can't
okay.
anticipate.
Yeah.
I'm gonna argue that I don't know that it's been implemented at the level that it needs
Okay.
to be implemented at.
So this will just give us the information we need if we need to adjust it or keep it going.
Right.
so, looking at the goal and then looking at the performance indicators, I mean, are we saying we want each of those categories to go up by 5%, or is this like take the 3 categories and average them and make that go up by 5%? Like, what are we, because graduation rate, I'd say, okay, well, yes, that's a very great goal, but maybe on, what is CW?
Coursework.
Coursework, I mean, maybe we want more than 5%, or in ACT, we'd want more than 5%.
Yeah, is it
So-
cumulative 5%, or
Yeah.
is it?
5% in each of those categories,
Each
so
category.
ACT is improving by 5%, graduation rate is improving, but those are pretty lofty goals, I'm gonna be really honest right now. Coursework, especially because part of this is, we wanna break down this data by every single student group. So for some of the student groups, that's gonna be a lot more difficult than
Okay.
others to move the whole percentage.
The
forward,
coursework,
so.
does that mean that's?
Advanced coursework, so AP, CE, or CTE
Oh,
pathways.
okay, so it's not our metrics of like how many students are failing their classes in the first.
No, this is
freshman year or whatever.
advanced coursework. Yep.
So 78% pass rate for advanced coursework, is that what we're?
Enrolled.
It's
Enrolled.
No,
Right?
C or better in those
Oh, I
courses.
see, okay, great.
I was gonna say, that's a lot of people.
I'm a little concerned about the ACT because how many universities, COVID said, no, we're not
It's
accepting
swinging
these
back.
anymore.
Oh, no, it's coming back.
Well,
Stanford just
and
reinstated it.
here's the issue too with ACT is it's based also, your scholarships are up and based on your ACT as well. So we're really pushing, the ACT is not just about what colleges accept, it really is an indicator of college readiness. And so, and it's a tried and true tested measurement of that. So if we really are making sure that kids are gonna be successful for college, these are gonna be the indicators.
And that percentage is how many hit that readiness standard?
That's correct, yeah.
And the state is using the ACT in their grade
Yes,
report.
that is correct, in the post-secondary
On that
readiness.
website.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, these are all the things that the state utilizes, for post-secondary readiness.
Right, then it sounds good, 5%.
Okay. Next one.
Okay. For wellness and safety, we have 3 goals. Increase the number of students and families who feel that our schools and district provide welcoming, supportive environments as measured by climate and stakeholder feedback surveys. Reduce the number of major offenses tied to bullying, harassment, discrimination, school safety, and physical aggression to 4% or lower across all student groups by 2030, and decrease the number of students who are chronically absent. So we'll look at the first one. Any feedback about our first goal?
I have one question. I would love to involve our employees in this priority. And so I just wondered, is there a way that we say, increase the number of students and families and employees who feel that our schools and districts provide welcoming and supportive environments?
I think that's a great point.
Because it actually even, I think that's what we're trying to do across, anyway, yes. I think it's a great idea.
I mean, I know it's
Let's do it.
embedded down there in other ways
No,
too,
no.
but I just thought
Have it up top.
that's a nice priority too.
When you're including employees in the strategy, so.
Yeah.
I'm glad we're doing a baseline here.
Yeah.
Because, You might wanna explain what a KPI, not everybody's gonna know.
Oh,
what
we'll
everything is.
definitely explain what a KPI is.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, next one. Okay, reducing the number of major offenses. Any feedback on this one?
So much work.
Should this one also have input from teachers and everyone who has to deal with behavior?
One of the things that, the reason that we created levels of behavior document that everyone will be trained on in August is because of the feedback from the teachers, as they feel like there's been inconsistency. There's inconsistency across how administrators deal with behavior, there's inconsistency even of how teachers are interpreting
How they
behavior, so.
report it,
Okay.
track
Yeah.
it.
Excellent question.
That is gonna be helpful.
I hope
In
so. It
August.
helped me a ton as a principal to have a levels of behavior document.
Okay, and number 3, decreasing the number of students who are chronically absent. Feedback?
Oh. Maybe not. I just wonder about our research-based strategies, like, over time we'll get more specific, like maybe you're focused on a strategy, or will schools choose a like here are some research-based strategies, you choose one, or like kind of how we narrow that in to know, like, what are we really doing and how is it supported by what we know within evidence in terms of best practices, because sometimes I feel like there's a wide range of things called research based. Do you know what I'm saying?
So the
Like
stuff
if I'm a
that's-
principal and I'm like, am I supposed to use what you tell me to use for strategy, or can I choose and then
No,
implement my own set of
this
strategies?
this would be coming from the district to help
Okay.
provide that
Thank you.
support as to what would work.
Okay.
So, I mean, it doesn't mean that remember that schools can also, in this case, if something starts to work for them, there's also action-based research that they should be implementing as well, so. But home visits are a good example of that if they're conducted a specific way. Another good example is just communication through text messaging, which is why our communication upgrade through PowerSchool becomes really important, and especially parents being able to excuse absences and just increasing that line of communication across.
Yeah, that's gonna
across
change the number
board,
a
so.
lot if a parent can
Do that on their
respond over
phone.
text.
I would like to see a little more detail here in the strategy, so whether it's getting specific, like you just did in those examples, or even just how the district is going to support schools in that, like, are you gonna check in with them on a certain, frequency, or
Yeah,
how will you
parents
see
will
how
probably
each
wanna
school's
know.
doing and follow up? I don't know, just something that shows that we are paying attention, just having that one bullet point just doesn't feel like we've quite thought through this well.
I think it's because we had the chronically absent part basically as a part of goal 1 originally. And so we decided that it was creating too many KPIs based on this, because part of the strategy of basically creating a welcoming environment is to reduce the numbers of students that are chronically absent. That's how you demonstrate that you're creating a welcoming environment, and the feedback that we got from our MTSS group was this probably needs to be a separate goal. So that's why you're seeing fewer strategies there, is because it actually was considered almost a part of goal number 1. So, and I don't know that I want to come in and start saying this is what, I mean, maybe our other specific pieces are what the district is doing, but I also want schools to own this. Like, there is a piece of this too, but we can list what some of those things are.
Or every school will have just
A
something
plan
a little more
or
what we're gonna be looking for as a district or working on.
Do you have any idea of what a decrease in the number of students who are chronically absent, like what we'll actually be looking for in terms of the number of students?
Look at your KPIs. So
Okay.
baseline chronic absenteeism rate, we're sitting at
412,
about 25%. So we just keep reducing that by 4% each year.
I'm asking, like, in how many students is that right now?
I guess we could,
Well, tell me what 25% of 13,000 is.
So I don't have a calculator.
There you go. So we have about 3,000 students currently that are. Gonna have him chime in, because he's the one that has our chronic absenteeism number. So, and it varies from, like you do have your more at-risk populations are gonna be a few percentage points higher, but chronic absenteeism is really something that isn't based on socioeconomics.
Yeah.
It's just the reasons why they're absent.
And I think it will definitely change with the text excusals of our school.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, it won't change because
well,
chronic
I think
absent.
the marking of it, because I believe I was technically chronically absent for a good part of my senior year, but.
Chronic absenteeism includes excused absences.
It does include.
So
Oh, okay.
chronic absenteeism doesn't matter
Just
what
you're
the
not
excuse
there
is.
that
If you're not in class, even if it's a school excused absence, it still counts towards that total because you're missing instruction. That's how the nation's definition works of that. So it won't matter. Next up.
All right. And last stewards of resources, increase the retention of high quality teachers between years 5 and 15 by 15% over 5 years. Increase communication about decision making and resource allocation by 15% as measured by specific methods of outreach.
I just want you to know that this was the hardest one to do. I finally just drew up our pen and I was like, I don't even know what to do with this. So of how to measure it. It was a little tough. So
okay, so let's look at the first one here. All right, here's the one about teacher retention. Any feedback?
No, but I do want people listening to know, it's not that we don't care about teachers in year 1 through 4 or beyond this at all, but I think we have all talked a lot about narrowing and having a couple of goals in each priority area to really succeed at those goals. It's not, we're not gonna pay attention to the other things, but this is gonna be an area of focus.
well, in the employee satisfaction survey, it becomes important that that's not just of those teachers between
Correct.
years 5 and 15,
Correct.
right? We're gonna, and we'll disaggregate that data out. So the needs that new teachers have may be different, obviously, than teachers that are more veteran. And so what does that look like in terms of more specific strategies that we put in place?
Yeah, but all 3 of these strategies benefit all of the teachers.
Exactly.
Next one.
Okay. And here's one about communication about decision making and resource allocation.
Well, that's good because we spent a lot of time trying to figure out.
I love this. This makes me so happy to see, actually. I think it's great.
Is the
Will
okay.
and then Jean.
Okay, is the goal like measuring how many emails we send out, or like?
Really, truly, it is.
Okay.
It's looking at. It would look at, in my opinion, each of these formats of communication, and are we? I mean, I think part of it is eventually we'll want to get probably to a point of how much are they being, like, if I could measure how they're opening it.
Right.
The social media platforms we can look at followers, we can look at how many people comment, we can, I mean, there's a little more sophisticated data we can pull. Do you wanna add anything to that, Caleb and Shauna, to help me? How we track this? This was our concern.
Yeah, it's other than counting numbers, it's kind of hard. But it would be looking at how much are we doing it enough? Are we seeing results coming from how often we're doing it?
One thing we saw when we were starting to talk about the superintendent search was we had a company come in and do a survey, right? And asking our whole community at large about how we were doing as a district. And one of the main pieces of feedback I feel like we got was they don't know. They don't know how we're doing. They don't know what we're working on or how we're doing, which was part of what led to this process in the first place. So I don't know if there's a way to kind of replicate a little piece of that along the way somewhere where we do reach out to the community at large to see like how they feel like the district is doing with their priorities. Like, are you aware of the district's priorities and how we're doing? Like, I don't know if that's something we
Like a
could
pulse
measure.
check? You do like a pulse check?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, if our idea is to be better communicators with our whole community, then maybe there's a way to touch base and get feedback. Some even kind of survey. I'm not saying something really expensive, but is there a way to ask, how do you feel like we're doing? What do you feel like
like our priorities are and how are we doing with those, like, cause then you'll know if the message is out there or not.
We had a lengthy discussion about this.
Okay.
In MTSS and in cabinet. And our concern with this is, like, a piece of this can be, like, are we communicating about it, and so can we measure, like, do you feel like you're getting more outreach from the district than you did before? Like, is there a general trend? We could certainly survey that, but we also know that people tend to pay more attention when they're disgruntled, and so then I get concerned about, well, no, I haven't heard anything, but maybe I'm not paying attention because of that. So starting piece of this is to just measure, what does our outreach look like? I think a second piece is, then what does that engagement piece come back as? I don't know that we've landed on how to measure that effectively.
I think we've had well, at least the one meeting I remember, we had a significant jump. We used to have like 3 people watch board meetings, and the last time I asked it was like 100. I think that might be a way for us to look at some things, like somehow the word is getting out that we have board meetings and people are watching them. So that might be another thing that, I don't know, we need to put it in here, but that might be a good way to take a look at it.
My question, because the goal is specific to our communication about decision making and resource allocation. Are we only looking at those types of communications, or are we, when we're looking at our baseline plus 3%, 6%, is that like all of our social media posts, all of our emails, or are we just looking at the ones that happen to be about like the decisions and our financials and things?
No, we're just making an assumption that it would, with increased communication, it's also gonna increase the communication about decision making and resource allocation. So we're not, we wouldn't have the time to disaggregate that.
Yeah. So that does seem a lot like to disaggregate, but maybe, and I am just like brainstorming here, do we need another bullet point that is like a certain percentage of our communication, or so often we send out communication specific to board meetings or financials or whatever categories we feel are this decision making resource allocation?
But aren't those embedded in all the other community, do you know what I mean, like it, I mean, I don't know, that feels
Are we, I mean, we've had to over time, like we have slowly started to add that in, right, but
I think that's
it's not necessarily assumed that we're doing all of them.
I think we could make it more specific if you wanted to, but I think one of our pieces is, you know, as Caleb and Shauna and I have been talking, to do a quarterly newsletter that actually kind of is similar to our summer newsletter but much more condensed, that would be specific to your districts and those pieces. The strategies will have that in there. I don't know, without making it so overwhelming, I didn't know how to make that specifically as measurable. I don't know. I get concerned sometimes that the methods we're using to measure are gonna become so cumbersome that it actually distracts us from what it is that we're trying to do. So I worry a little bit about that. This is pretty basic and we can start to look at it. We may need to follow up with a survey to say, do you feel like the communication that you're getting from the district is helping you understand the decision making and resource allocation, you know, and so if we wanted to add like that there would be a survey that would go out to assess, we could do something like that to determine if the communication's actually helpful. You know, and it could be something as basic as, do you feel like the district is communicating with you more frequently? 2, do you feel like the communication is actually helpful? You know, what are the pieces of communication that you most look at? You know, we could come up with something, you know, I don't know, pretty simplified. If you'd like us to add that, we could certainly do that. Okay.
And I guess now that I've talked it out, like, and thinking to what our other strategies have been for other goals, I think some of my questions were more to the nitty gritty that they're gonna figure out, right? You guys are all gonna figure out. So
And
never mind my
the
question.
dynamic dashboards is some of the things we're doing with Domo,
Domo,
and
yeah.
to embed that into our website so the public can kind of drill into things. So that's part of that as well. And so you know, whether people go out to the website and click on it, we're providing the information.
Yeah. Gina, did you have something?
Yeah, it's kind of off, it's under stewards and resources, but not on, necessarily on this. So I'm gonna bring this up fully recognizing that I worry that if we have too many things included in this, then it all gets watered down, right? But one of the things that I hear from my community, at least, when we talk about resources, are our facilities. They're worried, they don't think that we are good stewards of our facilities. And so do we not need something about facilities in here? Do we, and I know that we have the goal, it could be simple, I think, as let's get all of our, what's the system that Steve and
So there's the Brightly, which could change based on what our needs are and trying to streamline things a little better in the district. We had a lot of ideas for stewards of resources, and Wendy will corroborate this, but the issue is there is no KPI, there's no starting point other than we're already doing it. Like a great example was, you know, get financial awards for our reports. We already do that.
Right.
So if we state that as something that we want to do, the assumption is that we're just continuing things that we've already done. What you're saying is, you know, better stewards of our facilities, but how would we measure that?
So I would think even just something very simple like we're going to be good stewards of our resources. We're going to do this by making sure that we've inventoried everything, that we know where everything is, that we have a schedule set up, and we're going to do that by. It doesn't even have to have a bunch of KPIs other than we'd like to have it. Yeah, just like we want to have the bright line. Brightly. They're all. But like, I don't think it has to be like this, like an increase of anything. Maybe if we just have, our goal is to get it done. If we don't get it done by then, that's fine. But maybe just something for people to see we're working, because people all the time, I live in the Dixon area, so.
I was thinking the same thing.
We
need a long-term facility plan, and we're not quite there yet.
And also the communication about resource allocation, it could fit within there as a strategy of, you know.
Yeah, and that's fine. If we want to nest it in
watching, you know, the long-term capital planning, you know, all of that is part of what you're talking about. It is all part of us wanting to be good stewards of resources, and it's just things that we've talked about, like nonstop on the stewards of resources. But you know, where there's so much of it that we're trying to make measurable and actually show improvement. You know, you could say a decrease in the amount of time between work orders, but then what if something happens where there's 1 million work orders all of a sudden, and it's not necessarily not being good stewards, but it's also
And then I don't think we need to drill down, like, my opinion is we don't need to drill down on that. If we were to add, I'm not saying we have to, but if we were to add something about our facilities, which again I hear a lot about, it just needs to be something simple, like we are working on this and this is a projected completion date.
We will communicate this information clearly.
Or it could be nested in here, but I do think that people are going to, my people in my area, when they go to this, they go to this thing, they're going to be looking for facilities under resources because they don't think we know we're doing it.
Well, that's a big part of our resources, right? All of our buildings and I agree we should have something.
It has been brought up in every single community meeting. They have asked, tell us what you're doing to make sure that we're not ending up in this situation where where facilities are so on and so forth, you know.
Yeah. Melanie, do you want to turn around? Do you have any questions or input on any of these goals?
No, I agree with a lot of what the discussion's been going on. So.
Okay. Just want to make sure we didn't miss you because you were turning around. All right. Are we ready for the next slide then?
Okay. So
let's turn her back around.
It's just the last one.
Get her some exercise.
In terms of next steps, the district will be taking your feedback, making final changes to content, also working on Portrait of the Graduate. They're still in the works on, and they're going to be talking to you about that. And starting in July, they'll be working with us on starting to put together the design for the public-facing document. We'll do a main one, and then we also have the postcard that you all shared with us last time, so we'll make sure that they do a big one and then a condensed version that can fit on it. card that you can distribute, and so they'll start giving us pictures and ideas about what kind of design they would like and what format. We'll look at examples from other districts and they'll help us identify, and we have a graphic designer that we work with to help bring those mock-ups back to the district to get feedback. And then if everything is looking good and people are feeling good about that process, then we will be bringing the final adoption of the strategic plan back to you in August.
The question that I had for the board is, I'm wondering if under goal number 2 about those kind of post-secondary readiness indexes on academic achievement, if we put as a strategy, develop and implement a portrait of a graduate. So that actually just gives us some time to do that. And then we could really maybe even get some more input from students. What do they think a portrait of a graduate would look like? Maybe some additional parents and things like that to look at those pieces and take next year to actually really truly develop that piece of it. I'm wondering if we wanted to do that instead of rushing. We have some good ideas of good starting points that we could present in front of, I think, that group, but that could be something that our district leadership team leads out on with a few board members. I just wondered about that.
I like that idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm wondering if the design, should we put a QR code on it so we can go to a website where people can look at the details? If it's on like the postcard.
Yeah. I think just on whatever document, not the actual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that's a great
and
idea.
they get their newsletter and
Right. That's a great idea. People love the QR codes. It's a thing. I can't ever get mine to work on my stupid camera, but I'm technologically inept. I think we're excited.
All right.
Thank
That's
you.
like
Yeah.
great.
Thank you.
All right.
Yep.
Well, great. Any other questions or things that you need from us right now?
Are we good?
I think we have made up some time then.
Oh, good job.
A lot of time.
A good job. All right.
That's because we send it out ahead of time.
They did a great job. So.
Thanks, Laura. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Okay. So we are now going to item number 13, our consent calendar review and questions. So does anyone have any questions about the consent calendar?
I do. Hold on, let me get there. Okay. I'm on the large warrant summary. Okay. The playground? Crap. Where is it?
That's the board and play.
Yeah, which schools were those? Do you know? Yeah.
I can tell you.
That was the
Is that the
surface
only question?
underneath the wood chips, right?
It's actually
There's not gonna be-
there's
there
no
won't
wood
be wood
chips.
chips.
This is the material that's in there that risk management recommends for all playgrounds.
So we're
Like
getting
you
rid
is
of
one
wood
of them.
chips.
Yeah.
I will like that.
Okay.
Yeah, there are no, that is going to be replaced. That's one of the things that has risk management the most nervous is that
Okay.
material, because people tend to let it go a little bit longer than is real. And a couple of incidents at other districts, when students were significantly injured or actually passed away, they did have wood chips, and it just wasn't at the proper depth or the safety. So, Steve, or did you look
They're
at?
more of the cushion.
I was gonna say they're using pour and play. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it is the
They're
pour and
not,
play.
we're not using wood chips with fill anymore.
No.
There's way too much risk, cause even if you put it in right, you gotta go out there with a ruler and make sure it's good every day, cause if there's an accident and they measure it and it's not good, now you're liable. So they're moving all to that plastic pour and play stuff.
And I will tell you which
I felt like, I just remember that I feel like Jamie Davis posted posted it on Lakeview Elementary's social media about, she was excited they were getting the new playground, but I could be up in the night, I don't know.
I can tell you exactly.
It makes it also accessible to students that are in like wheelchairs.
Rock Canyon, Sunset View, Lakeview, Amelia, Provost, and Edgemont.
Oh my gosh, I feel so.
And then the other ones will get it.
Yep, the other ones will get it another year, so it just depends on what rotation they are. A lot of them already have that. I believe these were our last ones that needed it.
The Nogus has chips.
Then they're in the process of giving, they will be in the process. That's part of what that budget is for the rest of those.
Okay.
Those to be.
I'm glad to hear this.
Oh, good.
There's this swing set at Franklin that drives me crazy because the wood chips keep going down, down, and down, and down. And eventually the kids are too short to even get on the like swing set.
Yeah, and it required, and even they've made recommendations about even putting like not a sod, but this like a sod on top of the poured in place, cause a lot of times kids will get in there and start picking at it, and so to put something over it has also been a recommendation. Might be really unsightly, but it also might stay, they've shown that actually increases the life, but I don't know if that's something, turf, that's the word I was looking for.
Oh, turf.
Yes.
We could get a colored turf like Boise State State does.
No.
Oh, wow. All right, any other consent calendar questions? Terry, do you have any other?
No.
Anybody else? No. Okay. Thank you. Great. So item number 14, upcoming board calendar items. So we have an executive session about real estate on Thursday, June 20th, from 1 to 3. 1 to 3-ish. Maybe we'll be done sooner. I don't know. Starting at 1. And then our regular board meeting on Tuesday, June 25th. We'll have the exact agenda and timing out later. And then we take a break from meetings in July. We do not have any scheduled meetings in July.
Hallelujah. But I do have a question. So I noticed in the strategic plan in July, there's going to be, that's when we're going to be looking at the marketing, the marketing materials. Will that be more of a email type of a thing rather than a meeting? Okay.
She sees July and starts to pay.
I will also.
I checked my July.
Lisa,
So
I will also be sending out an email about a finance committee meeting in the next couple weeks to review some of our process. So, you too, Melanie. If you can come.
Okay.
And Terry. That was a given since you're sitting right by me.
Great. All right. Do we have a motion to adjourn our study session?
I move we adjourn the study session.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Fields. We are now adjourned. And we will begin our next meeting at 7 p.m. in the PDC with our public hearings followed by our business meeting.
There's dinner 2 minutes early, I just can't say.